What's up, everybody? This is the Duke London podcast, episode 26. We've just verified. I'm going to call this one the Vogue episode. I don't have a way to sum these people up besides wonderful voguing people. Let's go around and do a little intro because I have had brief conversations, but I don't know everyone on a super deep level. Mm-hmm. So let's start with Celine and go around and just kind of tell me who you are. And let's say, I said this before, but like who you are in the Vogue scene, let's say. Mm-hmm. How you see yourself as part of the Vogue scene.
Okay.
Hit it.
Well, I'm Celine.
Hi, Celine.
Hi. I mean, you all know me, but obviously, because you're my fam. But in the Vogue scene, in the ballroom scene, we call it the ballroom scene.
Okay, so cool. First correction
would be scene. To call it ballroom. That's like the umbrella term for voguing. Voguing is basically just a part of ballroom.
So it's kind of like street dance is the umbrella, and then you've got like hip hop, pop in and stuff.
For example.
So ballroom, and then Vogue is one aspect of ballroom.
So voguing is like specifically a category where you move, and there's different categories which we'll probably dive into later.
Yeah.
One of the categories is voguing, which is then separated into separate like different voguing styles.
Okay.
For example, Vogue Old Way, Vogue New Way, etc. But yeah, I am in the ballroom scene. I'm known as Celine. I'm in the House of Revlon, which is my major house, because there's a difference as well. We have two scenes within the ballroom scene.
Okay.
So
I should be making notes. Yeah.
It's about to be,
honestly,
giving school.
It's so much.
Right.
It's a lot. But in the major scene, so we have a major scene, which is the more serious scene of the ballroom scene. So that's where the bigger balls kind of like happen and occur. And then you have a kiki scene, which is the smaller scene. It's almost like a bit of a, like not kindergarten, but it's like, how would you call it?
It's like the Premier League versus the Champions League.
There you go. That's the perfect comparison. But yeah, so in the major scene, I'm in the House of Revlon, which is the house father is JJ Revlon. He's a DJ as well and a voguer and a dancer, all-round artist, fab. And in the Kiki scene, I'm part of the Kiki House of Angels, which was founded in the Netherlands. So it's part of the Dutch ballroom scene, but has also expanded. So we have different members across Europe, even in the States. So my full title in ballroom would be Celine Angels Revlon, or do we do... No, it's Celine Revlon Angels.
If you don't know, I've got no hope.
I'm sorry. Is it major house first?
Normally, but it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter.
Okay.
But yeah, you would say, I am Celine Revlon Angels.
So the first thing we need to do is rewind, and I'm going to call this the ballroom episode, not the Vogue episode.
There we go. Perfect.
There we go.
And my main categories that I walk in a ball, we always say walk, are Vogue Femme, women's performance specifically, because there's also differences between that for that category specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Vogue Runway was something I did before I started doing Vogue Femme. Mm-hmm. And in the Kiki scene, sometimes I like to walk Vogue Old Way.
Okay,
so
we're definitely going to come back to this Kiki scene.
Yes.
I'm interested about that.
For sure.
But let's go around with the introductions first.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Ashley in the ballroom scene, and more specifically, although Celine is right, the umbrella term is ballroom. For ballroom specifically, we're officially known as the house and ball culture. The house being the people and the balls being the events.
Cool, right? Makes sense.
Or archaically, you may also find us referred to as the Harlem drag ball scene. My name in ballroom is so I have two roles in the scene. So I compete and I also host. So as a competitor, I'm known as Candy 007. I don't have any house affiliations. In the Kiki scene, I'm Elijah T. I'm the overseer of the House of Tea, which is the first British Kiki house.
When you say overseer,
so like there's see now this is why
this is going to be just me asking questions.
Okay. So there's levels. So ballroom, in terms of the community, there's within houses there's different levels of leadership and positioning. So you'll have like the mother and father of a house, which is like the king and the queen.
Yeah.
Then you have the godmother and the godfather. Those are like the uncles and aunties that have the qualities of their parents, but maybe they might be a little bit more easier to talk to. Mm-hmm. They're really good at diffusing and like being trustworthy and those kind of things.
And is this always the mother and father are always the people that started the house, or can you like change who the mother?
Yeah, the mother and father is always the person that started the house, but those. You can switch between roles, so like you can go up. Some people maybe the mother, and they might go into a different role. Maybe like they might be stepping down or trying to achieve something different.
Got ya.
So the overseer, basically, I am. the father, JJ Revlon, he also started the House of Tea. So I'm just he lives in Spain now. So I'm basically just like looking after things while he's away.
Foster parent.
Babysitter. Just so that, because if we start getting into technical terms, we're gonna be here all day.
Okay.
And it does depend. Like it depends, like how big the house is.
Yeah.
Like it keeps growing.
Right.
A house may have chapters all over the world. Like different places.
So you would need like kind of different leadership
So
across the different chapters in the different places.
So like regionally, so like overall would be like the overall mother and father is usually the person that started the house, like, and then you might have like a regional, like, so for example, Celine belongs to the Angels, who started in Rotterdam. The Angels have like chapters all over Europe. They've got chapters in America, and you will have like a leader for each chapter.
I have, for example, I have a title actually I forgot to mention.
Here we go.
But I am Princess of the Kiki House of Angels for the British chapter.
What does that mean?
So that means, for example, you have a godmother and then you have a parent. So for example, Michelle, Sattva Angels, she's a part of the House of Ninja.
Okay.
But she brought me into the Kiki House of Angels because we're from the same hometown in Germany, which is Hamburg. And she moved to London shortly after me. And then we just kind of started building the chapter here. So we added 2 new members, for example, for the UK chapter, essentially. Because there's no other angels other than in London right now. And at some point, because I started to facilitate a bit of training, or like I started to like just go to a lot of balls, and if you start representing a house quite frequently and in a good way, so to say, if the parents feel a good connection for you or like would like to give you more responsibility, that usually is when they give you a title.
The princess, the prince and the princess are a bit like they're like the prefects and like the head boy and the head girl. More specifically, like the class president. They're supposed to be the bridge between the leadership and the other children in the house. Children being other like non-leadership members.
Exactly. So if Michelle wasn't here, for example, or like if she's away, I basically have to take care of regular practices for our house, or so to say.
Damn, and there's like hip hop crews that can't decide who's choreographing. It's like, who's running this rehearsal? I don't know. It's not me.
Oh boy.
Meanwhile, you guys have got like senior leadership teams and like all sorts.
We don't have that problem.
That's crazy. Right, Omar, tell me everything.
I'm Omar.
Hello.
And hi. Hi, everyone. And I guess in the ballroom scene, I go by Bam Bam. There's just kind of like a name that I've had for a long time, which may be changing, but we'll see what will happen. But yeah, that's me. I'm like a movement artist, dancer. I guess within the ballroom scene, I've been a part of quite a few different houses, and my journey has like changed and evolved over the time that I've been in the scene. Like I've been a part of the Kiki House of Tea, one of the founding members of that house, but my journey's kind of like evolved as I've gone on. And I guess a part of being like someone who's just like everyone else who walks balls, I also like promote or like community build. So I've like thrown Kiki functions in the past, basically. Something that I'm really interested. I guess I'm more interested in putting my effort into the Kiki scene.
Okay, let's talk about this Kiki scene. So you say it's like there's the smaller scene and then the bigger scene.
Yeah.
Are we talking level of dancer or size? How does it work with smaller and bigger? Is it like when you complete this scene, you move up? Like
I think what happens is because the Kiki scene is like mainly created to kind of encourage youth.
Okay.
It's used for a lot of like activism around like sexual health, because like we said before, that the house and ballroom scene, the reason why it's called that is because it's not just a culture that, similarly to the hip hop scene and lots of other scenes, that isn't just based around the performance. It's about the relationships, the family dynamic, and the Kiki scene kind of supports that in a sense. It's like kind of that, I think when we're talking about size, it's about they kind of do different things. The major scene is like the glamour, when you're ready to like be full force, like out to show, whereas
and maybe a little bit more cutthroat.
A bit more competitive, higher stakes. Whereas then the Kiki scene is more like playful, accessible, like less kind of pressure. more accessible, kind of like you can go in, maybe if you haven't tried a category, you can experiment there. It's like a bit more of a
no one's
nurturing
gonna
environment.
look at you like a wrong way for not doing great at something.
No, well, I mean, they will.
That's they will. Yeah,
definitely.
But it's like the Kiki scene. So yeah, in terms of it being concentrated on youth, like why the Kiki scene started was because to generally balls are, they're not necessarily inappropriate for younger people, and they're not necessarily explicitly adult, but they're often held in places where it might not necessarily be you might need ID, where people that are under 18 are not going to be able to get in. People are adults and enjoying themselves, and I'll put that, and that might not be like a conductive environment for someone who's younger to be a part of. So it definitely is tries to be a more safe space for the youth to get involved in ballroom. Sometimes for entry into Kiki functions, they might have, I know that in New York this happens where the function might be funded by a health organization. So they're like, you can get in free if you get tested or like some things like this.
Yeah, right. Which you wouldn't necessarily have that same drive in the, how do you call it? Like you have the Kiki scene and then just the ballroom scene.
The main scene.
The main scene. Major scene.
But again,
major scene, right.
Premier League versus Champions League.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah. So it doesn't mean that the level of competition
that's what I was gonna ask,
is lower, because the Kiki scene is actually more fun, and there's a lot more innovation seems to happen in it. But, and this is coming from somebody who takes part in ballroom, but the Kiki scene is more, because it's it's generally geared at the younger people. It's a lot more fun. Like sometimes maybe like they're more inexperienced, but that's why it's so good, because everyone's just coming to enjoy themselves. When it comes to the main scene, it is a competition. There's no time for I made a mistake, or like if you did not win, that's it.
Right.
That's why usually when we have like major balls, so for example in Paris, when you usually have like a major ball and then the next day you have a Kiki function. So most people usually just love going to the Kiki function because they're like, I can it's less pressure, it's more fun. People are just genuinely less shady as well towards each other. I mean, there's still a lot of shade, but it's just genuinely a more relaxed atmosphere.
But where does that atmosphere come from? Because like I guess say with hip hop, just from my experience of battles and things like that, the pressure is usually the size of the event and the prize money. So if it's less people and it's only £100 prize, all right, I'm going to have fun. If it's £500 prize and a big state, or £1,000 and a huge thing, you're like, all right, I'm going to.
No, I think that's the same. And actually,
I think that does happen.
No, it's the same. But while we're here, Celine, who won. With her house members, who won €1,000
okay
for women's performance.
I mean, what, you want me to talk about that?
Yes.
Oh my god. Yeah. So basically, I've been a 007
for. Explain that real quick.
So I've been in ballroom for 5 years now.
Okay.
And in ballroom, when you are not in a house yet, in any house, you have that. So similar to having a house title or like belonging to a house. If you don't belong to a house, you're called a 007. You're like,
where did that come from?
I think free
James
agents.
Bond?
James Bond. Yeah.
Like you're by yourself.
Oh, just because he's alone. Yeah.
All of your missions are done by yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Like the mission of getting an outfit, the mission of picking a category, like the mission of finding out who you are, who's your ballroom persona, like who you want to be. Like it's a huge development personally as well. Like, and ballroom is something that is definitely not for the lighthearted, and also it's not something that you can just like. It takes years to actually understand the language of it and where your place is in it. And
Luke's like, yep, it's gonna take years.
It's gonna take years. So like,
I can already tell.
Seriously, so 5 years. It was 5 years. It's 5 years for me now.
Okay, so
and
just another question on that: is being a 007 in the ballroom scene, is it seen as like is that an undesirable thing to be, or is it just as valid as being in a house?
It's, well, I mean, the goal is to be in a house.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if you're a 007, you're kind of seen as like not in a house yet, as opposed to just that's what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not something that you would necessarily choose to belong to, but the goal is to be in a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But because a ballroom is like, because it's like, again, like other scenes, there's politics, there's like, different houses have different kind of aesthetics or looks or aspirations associated with them. Same, I'm sure, like different crews have different vibes in that same way. you kind of try and find the family that's matched to you. So it's kind of like that.
Like take your time
journey
to
of
find
self-discovery. It's like about like where you find yourself.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's like valid to be 007 and like until you find the right match, as opposed to just jumping into any.
Well,
house.
this is like super individual, obviously. Like we have sometimes cases where people join a house really quickly, and that doesn't mean that they don't know. That makes it any less valid. But then you have people who just want to join a house quickly for the sake of joining a house quickly because maybe they're feeling insecure about walking by themselves. For me, it was definitely a case of I want to make sure that when I join a house, I stay there because I definitely care very much about the family value in ballroom.
Yeah.
And so for me, it took a long time to actually decide because... not even decide, but maybe to like, we have this term as well where we say welcome home when you join a house.
Nice.
And I really wanted that to resonate with me deeply. Like, so for me, it was like, I mean, I basically started with the London Ballroom Scene. Like in Germany, I definitely heard about it, but it was when I moved to London that I kind of like started, getting closer to it and getting to know the people that were a part of it back then. And JJ was very much one of the earliest people part of the ballroom scene.
I still have the video of when Celine first competed.
Oh
on
my
phone.
God, stop. I do not want to see that ever again.
She actually should have won, but
I'll stop. But yeah, so JJ was always there, and he was already like House of Revlon back then. He was already the father, I think. I'm not sure if he was the father, but he was definitely, maybe not, but he definitely had a big role in facilitating a lot of trainings for people, and it was very accessible for everyone, which was fab. And that's kind of like where I started off, really. And so for me, it was like 4 years of being a 007, actually, which is quite a long time.
Yeah.
Like usually people are not a 007 for that long. Because as you say, like, like it's definitely not a desired state to be in. But for me, it was very much like I kind of enjoyed it. And also I had my Kiki house because you can be in a Kiki house already without having a major house. So basically that means when you walk a major ball, a big ball, you're a 007. But when you walk a Kiki ball and you're already in a Kiki house, then you have your title and your family there.
So they wouldn't like recognize your house, your Kiki house in a major ball.
Exactly.
So would I'm trying to process all my thoughts. Where would it not be recognized? So if you sign up under like your Kiki house, they'd be like, "What are you doing?"
No, so they definitely like, so at the major ball, usually the major houses, and at major balls, usually they know what Kiki house you belong to.
Right.
There's always a commentator, for example, at every ball for every function. And the commentators usually, they kind of know the ins and outs, and they know who's currently in the scene and exactly who's like, part of the scene. They usually know people's names and titles. And the more
so they're
you
just
walk,
not going to call it.
they're not going to call it. They're going to call you 007. So if you go, if I was to say like back in the day when I was a 007 in the major scene, but an angel, like that was I'm an angel, so to say, like, or for example, Ashley is a T. That would
T
be
like the letter.
A
No,
T.
as in the drink.
Kiki house of tea.
Cool.
Like tea. Then if I would be walking a major function, that wouldn't be mentioned because it wouldn't matter.
Right,
it would only
it's just
matter.
irrelevant to this.
It would, exactly. It would only matter in a Kiki function.
Got ya.
Like
So
the-
for me,
No, I was going to say,
Continue.
sorry to cut you across. The people that, so for example, interpersonally, the people that you know that are in your house might support you at a ball, but generally people, if you're at a main ball, people will be calling you by your main scene house name.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about Galaxy, right? This is why it was.
Sorry, this is
why
going to be a
I
lot
think-
of side
Deviations.
conversations.
But this is just important to mention to understand because you were asking about the big pressure at these events. So basically, you get really used to walking after a while. Like you find your category. As I said, I was walking runway for quite a long time because I felt like, and we will probably talk about this more about the specifics of Vogue Femme, but because there's a lot to say about that. But I just never felt, and there's a specific reason for that too, like I just never felt like Vogue Femme was mine to express for a long time.
Right.
And I still feel some type of way about it sometimes because it is important to recognize where it comes from. Like it comes from Black trans women.
Right.
And that is something that obviously as a white cis woman, like I had some time to understand first. And I was like, that is a language that, I am, adapting. How do you say, like, I'm using it on my body, even though it's, I have a completely different experience in my own body. than those women, you know. So it's something that I definitely had to acknowledge and recognize and learn about first, and that's why I didn't feel for a long time that I should be doing it. So I did Vogue Runway. I'm not Vogue Runway. We don't say that, Runway, because Runway, for example, is not a voguing category.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we wouldn't
Should
say
have brought a pen and paper.
Yeah, we wouldn't say Vogue Runway.
It's fine. We'll get into it. Don't worry.
But we'll get.
It's like you're gonna learn.
Exactly. Runway is more like a fashion category where you literally
Right.
you usually you make your own costumes, or you have a designer who makes a look for you specific on the theme that is given at the ball. So, for example, they say like bring an outfit inspired by, I don't know, like Alexander McQueen or something,
nice.
and then you make sure that you get an outfit that fits that category and that theme. So
sometimes it's beneficial to like come with a reference photo, because
yeah.
there's been a couple of times.
There's been a couple
where
of times.
even for me, and as part of performance, I remember we were in Paris, and they said for performance you need to bring it like Team Rocket from Pokemon. I thought I was going to be smart, and I came as Giovanni, the Team Rocket leader. I got chopped.
Oh, because they were like, what's this?
Yeah. No, but the host apologized to me because he actually got it, understood where I was going with it, but it's fine.
Oh my god. But yeah, things like that can happen, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of like, you learn and you go and like you get chops or you get tens, like that kind of chops and tens, by the way, are the way how you're being put, like it's almost like a pre-selection. Like tens are like the pre-selection in voguing. A chop, it basically means you're out.
Okay.
But it happens right there and then.
Yeah, right.
So there's no like aftermath where you're like, okay, these people have made it. No. Like it's for everybody to see that you're out.
Yeah.
So, you know, because that is like the part of, you know, that, but it's immense growth comes out of that. So yeah, after being, you know, 007, having walked runway, I at some point started becoming more of a performance girl because I understood the language a bit more, and I think I needed my femininity somewhere like be expressed more.
Okay.
And because of JJ mainly, actually, because he was teaching Vogue Femme a lot at the time. And I kept practicing with him. And then, after 4 years of like traveling balls and going to balls and like spending lots of time with different houses and different families, different people, it was always the Revlons that I loved the most. And there was the Galaxy Ball this year, which is a huge ball. Like it's kind of like almost like an annual ball that is quite big in Paris. It's organized by Vinnie Revlon and Charlie Ebony. And I was due to come out as a Revlon then, because if you decide to join a house, usually you will be announced at a ball.
Oh, wow.
So that was quite a big deal for me. Because
Announcing, like, as in when you go
debut.
But is it separate to the competition, or as you go to do your or walk in your category, then they say, and then everyone's like, oh shit.
Or maybe it depends. It depends who the ball is, because obviously there's that commentator who kind of is like the master of ceremonies, who, if they know or in the know, or if your house parent has told them, they might announce you at the beginning,
like in a special little your own thing.
Because they always have this thing called LSS.
Okay. Oh, that's what we were talking about. Yeah. Do you want to explain that quickly? Because I think this was off
so
camera.
it stands for Legends, Stars and Statements.
Okay.
So basically, the commentator will be warming up the room, the beats are playing, everyone's getting ready, whatever the case may be, and they call out people who are either legend, stars or statements. So people who are a part of the scene, who are contributing to the scene to kind of represent their category. And it kind of just gets everyone in the mood, in the vibe.
Nice.
I guess Elijah is a commentator, so you could probably explain a little bit like in more detail about.
Okay. Is there anything that you guys think I should cover before I start? Okay, so a commentator has like a couple of different jobs at a ball. So they are an MC and a host. So you've got to like narrate, I think. So I break it into 3 different jobs. So the first and most, I think, well-known one is chanting. So chanting is specifically what we will call MCing or spitting bars in ballroom. So there's a lot of prolific commentators, but chanting is specifically for performance.
Okay.
People will obviously like show recite a rhyme that they've written, or maybe it can be on the spot. There's a lot of like rhymes that commentators from before have that are very much a part of the culture because like they're famed. So and I do it all the time. I use like old
like
rhymes
as a reference point to like the history kind of thing.
Yeah. So so there's chanting. There's also you need to entertain the people. So like very much, I always refer to a ball. And although I know that we haven't actually said it, what a ball specifically is, it is a pageant that is also a knockout tournament.
Okay.
So the pageantry lies in the art forms and the way that you express yourself, but the knockout tournament is based on how the competition actually goes.
Right.
So the preliminary round or the qualifying round is referred to as tens, yeah?
Okay.
And everybody has to, when the category is called, everybody has to get tens in order to compete. So during the tens, you're usually expected to show some sort of mastery of your art form. When I say mastery, I don't necessarily mean that. I think proficiency should probably
Right.
be a better word. You need to show like you know what you're doing, that you can
That you
express
deserve to
yourself.
be in this competition.
Yeah. You got to express like the different, and each different category has different elements of
Okay.
it, of the art forms. So like for all of us are performance walkers, and we all walk Vogue Femme. So you're usually expected to express yourself, go through the elements, like shuffle them and use them in ways that you don't necessarily need to bring out all the big guns, but you need to show some sort of proficiency in the art form, and then you'll be judged. And then obviously if you get your tens, that means that you will be competing that night. If you get chopped, that means that, okay, today's just not your night, come back next time.
Cool. And wait, where were we going with that? Oh, the LSS.
The LSS,
Yeah.
Yeah. So an LSS, okay, so obviously Omar said that that's legend, statement and stars. So legend, statement and stars, these are specific titles within ballroom that are awarded to people that have made waves in the scene. So the first is stars. That means if you're considered a star, or you've been named as a star, that means that you are generally like maybe like very, very new in your journey, maybe up to 3 or 4, between 1 and 3 years. You've made waves. You would have won, or if you haven't won, you're generally getting to the last stages of the competition. You're making a good impression. You may or may not be in a house. The statement is like the level up from that. So you probably would have been walking up to between 4 and 7 years, and you may or may not be a house leader. You may or may not have hosted your own balls. And obviously, you can be a legend, a statement star for any category. So you can be a legendary commentator. You can be a legendary DJ, a legendary ball thrower. All like you might be like a notorious style villain.
Right.
Legend, statement and star apply across the whole of the
Just
scene.
to the scene, as opposed to like to your particular category or anything.
So after statement is legend. So legend is specifically, and that is like probably the most esteemed title in all of ballroom.
So you'll know like it's not just like a name, the LSS thing. It's like literally there's 3 categories of like person you could be in that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
with legend, so you usually would have been walking between anything. It depends, because some people have been deemed really quickly, others it's taken longer. So usually anything between 7 and 13 years, you would have.
And who decides who gets these?
So it's voted on by a panel of leaders.
Mad.
So like your name might be submitted by a house member, or like people might be talking about you, and then they'll like the grand coven will decide whether or not you will be deemed. Sometimes your house members might be like, maybe it's a bit too early, or give them a couple more
Is this like
years.
a worldwide panel?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have like a worldwide panel of like.
So it would be a panel of icons.
Do they get together specifically for this, or it's like they deal with all Vogue matters?
No. So it's specifically for this. So they have conversations. And
This is
so-
crazy.
But
though.
there's levels. There's even more. There's even more.
levels to it. So okay, so for legend again, so usually would have been walking anything from 7 to 13 years, and there's when I said specifically about things like having may or not be a house leader, there's an actual criteria which you can find online that states like things that you should have covered. It's not always verbatim, but legend, you're known for your category, and you've made waves in the category. You're always winning. If you're not always winning, you're getting to the final battles, and you are known for making moments. So you might not have won, but everyone remembers your battle. You're generally known as a good leader. I'm missing something.
You might have even like changed the category or elevated it in some way.
Yes.
Like these are like things that like,
How do you do that?
may have.
So like your style specifically, you set a trend. So
got
everyone
ya.
now follows after that because of you.
And then they recognize like we can see your influence in this category.
And to be legendary, most to get to these accolades, which is how they should be referred, are usually granted to people who've walked and won. And they will each year, and we've only just started doing it within the last year in Europe. They'll post a list of qualifying balls that you need to walk and win in order to be nominated. And when you'll be nominated for of the year. So you might be, for example, I might get commentator of the year. Celine might get women's performance of the year, and so
Might
on
get
and so
face.
and so you would have need to walk at this ball, and the qualifying balls might have to have a certain amount of categories. they might need to have like and certain distinctions, like because there's levels of balls. So there might be a mini ball which only has maybe like 6 or 7 categories,
Right.
just for fun. Then there's major balls that have like, when I'm talking about 20 categories, and you're there from 4 in the afternoon till 2 in the morning. Africa Ball 1. No, because I'm laughing, but I had to take the contacts out after I competed because my eyes stopped focusing.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's actually a thing. Balls can actually last hours. Like I think there was a ball once that was like 15 hours long or something.
Whoa.
Yeah,
In the States, I think.
When you watch, you know the video where Deborah's like where Deborah and Kelly are going, that's morning. That's morning. There's loads of times you'll be watching a ball and they've got a window so you can see it's daylight outside. Yeah, it's 8 o'clock.
Oh my god.
It's like this ball
seriously.
started at like in the evening.
It's crazy.
That's
So
mad.
you need to win, like you would generally need to have one.
Yeah.
And then that's how they like that's how you become eligible.
Yes, yeah, right. And then so this LSS not category but like segment of the event, it happens at the beginning and it's like everybody's called up to, do they dance or do they move or is just come up and
they can
be
do
awesome?
what they want, I guess.
Yeah.
They
Right.
can normally may demonstrate their category. So if it's if they walk face, they might self face, but sometimes they might not be in the mood to, so they might just walk out, greet the people.
Just be
who are
like,
there.
"Hey, I'm here."
Be
If
fab.
it's a legend, they might sometimes you might just get like a finger wave.
Yeah.
Because they're too fab.
Yeah,
For
right.
the women in the scene, especially for the women in the scene, like for example, Sanaya, like on days that she's not feeling it, she might just come and like just swing her hair a bit, just like serve like some like sexiness to the cameras and go and sit down because
Cool.
like after if you've been dancing for like 20 years, it's not the same thing that you're giving in the 90s. Your kneecap.
Yeah.
But so this legend, statement of stars, and past that we have icon.
Right.
So an icon is like a legendary legend.
Yeah.
So that means like, so probably after, as a legend, you would have, so they have legendary categories. So they might have legendary performance, legendary face,
wow.
and so on and so forth. You, as a legend, have continued to
Kill it in
compete and win.
Wow.
Like you're known, like you can still kick it with the new kids and still and win if you want to. You don't have to walk, but if you do walk, you can like still like give them a run for.
Mad.
And then there's quite a few icons now. Actually, I think Bournemouth's been gone on long enough. And then there's pioneers. Pioneers basically, you were there at the beginning.
Right.
This would not exist without you.
Yeah. What's mad to me is the level, just from what I'm hearing now, is like the level of organization in your scene. Like, oh my God, we need that in the hip hop scene. It's immense. I really didn't know that was, that was a thing. And it's like, oh my God, we can't get together to organize a fucking event with more than 2 companies. And like, you guys have like a panel of people like to decide. Yeah, I think that's amazing. And
There's a whole structure to it.
Yeah. The only thing is
How
that-
did that? Sorry, yeah, go on.
The only thing is that with the structure, and I said this to you before.
Yeah.
Ballroom only makes sense if you actually come to a ball.
Yeah.
No matter how much reading that you do or how many videos. Okay, I was lucky enough that I am too much of a nerd and a know-it-all. That I had watched videos for like 6 years before I'd actually gone to a ball.
Yeah.
So I understood what I was supposed to be looking at and what to look for. Most people that I've tried to explain to Ballroom to that are not a part of Ballroom have only understood once they've actually come to watch a ball.
Yeah. So in you guys' opinions, I guess, how did Vogue get to this level of organization? And like, so around when did Vogue start? Give me like a decade.
The 80s?
So similar time to like the kind of
The end of
street
the
dance
70s.
culture and hip hop culture.
Because Old Way and B-boying are not one and the same, but Old Way is definitely
They have
B-boying.
crossover, don't they?
Yeah.
They make similar time.
That's the Old Way is B-boy's gay brother. And like, no, because in
And
Old
I think
Way-
it's important though. It's important to say, I think, as well, because like if we're talking about, I think the reason why it's kind of have this pageantry and organization is because that its roots were in drag pageants to begin with. Like it was a move away from the drag pageants, most famously by Cristula Beja.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you've seen the clip, but there's
The Queen?
It's so
but
famous.
she basically moved away from a scene which didn't include her as a black trans woman and the Latinx trans women of that scene. So it's important that even like when we're talking about these families, the reason why the kind of weight is given to these families is because it's about people who are marginalized or ostracized or don't have those families in their outside in mainstream society have like built this for themselves.
Yeah.
But you know what I
To
find
support themselves.
You know what I find interesting is like I would draw a parallel with a lot of the like b-boy crews and how, from my knowledge of like they were gangs and these, it was a similar situation.
No, but it's the same thing
because they were.
But
I guess they were probably feeling the same stuff.
Yeah,
they were
right.
probably like dealing with the same austerity, dealing with the same racism. Do you know what I mean? Which meant that they were like, well, who do we have? Who can we
But
look
then
to?
if we look now, like that is such a heavy, like you said, it's a something that's been brought to now and kept as like the essence of the scene, I guess, over the competition and the money and the stuff. But I don't see that same level of weight put on crews in the hip hop scene.
See, the thing is, it's interesting that is that way, because voguing and hip hop came up at the same time, and they were doing these dances in the same places. So places like the Loft, Studio 54, what's it called? Paradise Garage, Sound Factory,
Literally evolving in the same spaces.
These legendary clubs in New York is exactly where they happen. And if anything, the B-boys was going to the house clubs because the gay clubs was the only places that was playing amazing music. Like, and you'll notice that even like some legendary figures in the scene, so that when they were sneaking into clubs when they were 12 and 14, like they were seeing on one side it was this and on one side it was that. With the ballroom, because I think maybe because again the people have been marginalized and that's all that they've had.
Yeah.
And because ballroom, we are quite an insular culture. So unless you know about us or you know where to look or what to look for, you're not going to find anything.
Yeah.
I think hip hop is the hip hop.
There's a lot more open arms kind of thing. It's like anyone can join in with us.
Yeah, very much so. Although I think you guys you do have your royalty and you've got your OGs. The same way we've got legends, we've got icons. Because our culture has always been more stylist because it's come from pageantry. So balls in queer society have been happening since the 1800s.
Right.
Like,
So I also feel like maybe like another reason of why the organization has to be a bit more on point with ballroom is because we have to like create looks.
And
like
the pageantry, but
and also like the safety.
Safety of it.
We can't be out in these streets because someone's going to move you. I remember the first time I went to Paris, I went for like my birthday when I was 21, me and JJ, who we was talking about earlier. And I remember being like, we're outside the club and obviously we're getting ready for the ball, whatever. And people were in dressing gowns. I was thinking, why are people in dressing gowns? And obviously when they come into the function, they take off this like dressing gown and they're in their full effect. But you can't be up in the garden or on road. Like I couldn't be out on road up in drags because someone's gonna have an issue. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
You can't. I think it comes
you
down to
yourself.
terms of safety. You know, it comes down to terms of like it's not safe for us to be out there in in that same vein.
And do you think also that let's say if we look at the parallel between Vogue now and the hip hop culture now in a lot of places, do you think the percentage of marginalized people in hip hop has gone down? Whereas like someone like myself who is very much a guest in the hip hop culture and not of the demographic of where it started, I can participate and there's a lot more people of my demographic. Whereas in Vogue, it still remains very much a safe space for the same demographic of people who it started for.
I think it's definitely like there's always been heterosexual people, cis people, white people in the ballroom scene. I think that like obviously it's a lot more now, but I think at the same time it's definitely still a thing for the queer community, and I think
for the queer black and brown community.
it's definitely something that is centers us and it's meant to be centering us. And I think for that reason, I think as a queer black person, sometimes you're not safe even in like spaces with cis people. You're not necessarily safe with other, like it's very nuanced, I think, and it's important that's like, I think it's protected in
so
that
structure, the importance of houses, the organization kind of, you would say, like still protects people in the same way that it did. Whereas in hip hop, me being in a crew or not being in a crew doesn't do the same thing as someone in New York in the 70s being in a crew or not being in a crew. That provided some sort of protection, which in my day-to-day life, a crew is almost like just a kind of like, oh, this is fun, we all hang out together, but it's not providing me day-to-day protection.
I guess I wouldn't want to speak for someone in a hip hop crew because I'm sure there's people in hip hop who are like, yo, this saved my life.
Of course,
you know what I mean? But I can talk from my experience, and I know that like for someone who's like been kicked out of their house or experienced homelessness or has still, these experiences are not anything, these are things that I still experience and my peers still experience. Do you know what I'm saying? Like people that I come into contact with or I bring into the scene, scene or I meet in the scene, these are daily things that they still experience. So I think it's something that's like it's still serving a purpose for protecting those people, and it's still an issue that's alive today. Like,
and not to say there's no crews that exist that provide, like in hip hop, but just I guess there's a lot of people that don't need it in the same way that it was needed for everyone back in those days.
Yeah, for sure.
And maybe like you said, in Vogue, the even though it's spread around the world, that issue still remains.
Yeah,
whereas
sure.
in hip hop, if we're in if we come from a place that's not dangerous, what necessity
also,
do we have for a crew? You know,
and this might sound ignorant, but not that I care. You can see, like I was saying to you before we started recording, it is very, very obvious. Like with voguing and even the dancing itself, you can see when someone who has grown their art we can see who the actual quality of your vogue and how you vogue will show us.
Do you want to pull the mic around? Sorry.
The actual the performance that you give us will show us where you've been, where you've learnt. It'll show us often who you've learned from, the circumstances under which you vogue, the emotions that drive your performance. There's so many levels, and these things are very, very obvious to people who are in the scene.
Right.
So I can see that you were in commercial classes from like the way that you articulate yourself in your movement.
I want to talk about that in a minute, but go on.
100%.
It's one of those things that where like you need to, although voguing itself is, it's always talked about as this highly like stylized dance, and what it is. But I was watching earlier this week. I was watching Bruce Lee's documentary with my aunt, and Bruce Lee constantly talked about mixed martial arts as being able to express yourself truly and honestly. And that is what real voguing is. Being honest, being able to express yourself honestly and truly. And I remember one of the icons, Didi. Didi is a really she's a really big icon for Femme Queen performance. Femme Queen is a ballroom term for a trans woman.
Okay.
And I remember in this video this interview that she was in 2013 or 14, she said that like what voguing is your own expression on the beat. Although there are pillars of performance, then there are certain conventions that you are expected to meet. We are looking to see your own expression. We are expecting to see personality. We're expecting to see fight. Like so many people's vogue comes from different things. It may come from, like, for example, Celine. Although like Celine is quite modest, but look, she actually kind of runs women's performance in the UK at the moment. And again, she won with her house. She won €1,000 at the Galaxy Ball 2 that happened in Paris. I'm trying to push her to changing her Instagram handle to Celisi with the 1K, but she doesn't. She doesn't want to hear it. But yeah, like with Celine, for example, I always say to her, when Celine first started voguing, I was a bit like, okay. And then as she became, and as she her art form developed, I was like, I've always said to her, I don't know what you're expressing, but whatever it is, you are having a lot of fun. And because you are having so much fun, I am enjoying myself.
Yeah. I think like my girlfriend always talks about this in general in terms of like dancers and stuff, is like sometimes you look at someone dancing and you're like what the fuck are you doing? And then like maybe 10 years later or something, you look at them and you still say, what the fuck are you doing? Or like you look at them and you were like, oh, that's what you've been trying to do all this time. Like it looked like shit before because you didn't know how to, not saying you look like shit.
No, but it did.
But it's like when you get it and you get the thing that you've been trying to get all along, sometimes it can be magic, because I think also I think this works across all dance styles, but it's like there's some people that will have something unique, and I see like a percentage of them will keep that, and even though people are like, no, you can't do that, they keep it, and then when it works, it fucking blows up. But then the other side is like people go, oh, that doesn't quite look how it's supposed to, and they go, oh, okay, I'll change, and then they just kind of blend in.
And that's so true. Like I feel like as well in like talking about performance in voguing, like specifically in Vogue Femme, like they split them into soft and cunt and dramatic, and I think like
okay, wait, you gotta explain that for me.
So there's like two different kind of styles
of way of moving.
Yeah, within the same category. So one is kind of more sensual, soft, delicate, dainty.
And this is in which category?
And this is Vogue Femme, so in performance, Vogue Femme. And the other dramatics is more like athletic, dynamic,
chaotic,
expressive, chaotic, like explosive, and these two, so people sometimes fall into either side or a mixture of the two or their own style, like whatever that is. Like we were talking before, people who've kind of like shifted the art form or whatever.
Yeah.
So like people, I don't know.
Let's get into that.
Yeah. So like, I don't know, like an example is maybe Laomi. Like it's probably the most like obvious example of someone who kind of like mixed kind of athleticism with still remaining like extremely feminine and having like explosive power, but also a softness to it. So like finding a mid ground. But the reason I was saying this is like, I feel like when you come from maybe an outside eye from outside of the scene or outside of the culture, you might see someone who is a dramatic performer, like, or they're more leaning towards that style and be like, oh, it's a flex foot, or they landed really hard on the floor. And, but you know, maybe the same in like Crump, for example. You don't understand the energy or the kind of the essence that they're channeling.
Well, and there's a lot of styles that when you don't understand the techniques behind them and what you're being judged on and what where it came from.
Yeah, like how to read the nuance of it.
Yeah,
like,
it can, and I think this is also valid. Like it can look like shit to your eye that doesn't know anything, because it's like,
of course,
you know, it's the same with anything. It's like when you start, the more you start to understand the intricacies, it's kind of just being like, oh yeah, Shakespeare doesn't make any sense, but it's like when you understand how he's trying to do it, it makes a lot of fucking sense.
That's why we keep saying like it's literally a language. Like, if you don't understand the vocabulary, you're not going to understand what it's trying to say to you.
And there's stuff, I think, like the kind of typical examples are like breaking and popping, which is like commercially anyone can, even if they don't understand the nuances, it's like, oh, but he's spinning on his head, so the language sounds cool, in air quotes, you know. Or like with popping, it's like, oh, he's doing the robot, he doesn't look like a human, I don't need to understand for that to look cool. And then there's other styles which is like, you're not gonna like this until you delve in a bit deeper, and you know, and it's fine.
I feel like kind of similarly to what maybe Celine was touching on, where she was talking about being unsure about whether she wants to move in this way or to use this movement quality. Like for me, like my personal experience, like I feel like if you see someone, for example, Butch Queen in ballroom terms, that's a gay man, walking Vogue Femme, and they're coming from the back, they build from the time they reach the judges. It's the use of the language. They build the woman that they're trying to show you. So by the time they've reached you, they're using hands, they're using like their 5 elements to build up this image. You'll start to see the breasts, you'll see how long the hair is. You know exactly where their hips lie. Right. Because of this movement. Like you see this person transform up to the judges, and that's the point of which they either get their... do you know what I mean? Do you kind of get what I'm saying?
No,
it's like sense.
And it's like, this is the thing, like as a woman, especially myself, for me, that was exactly what it was all about. After a while, when I started understanding the building and the growth that comes with being a woman, that I could not be like anywhere outside of that space. I could not be that woman because I'm not allowed to be. Like,
Interesting.
And even it's funny because we, as race,
despite all the privilege I hold, obviously, but
no, that's what we're gonna get to. So race, gender, sexuality, and class are really, really important things in ballroom because they've generally informed how ballroom has come forth. And one of the things that I've learned by talking to, obviously this is Europe, so although ballroom in where it's come from, New York, is very predominantly black. Obviously, as the culture has spread to Europe, we live in Europe, so the people that who started the scene in Europe are a very small minority. So of course it's the people that attend balls and the people that are competing, it's not going to look like a ball that happens in New York, which is fine. And even for me,
Paris even.
Even for me, like speaking to Celine and other like cis women, cis white women that I know, like what I become to understand is that like, no, this is a safe space for them because we live in a patriarchal society. So the femininity that that society expects them to express or requires them to express can be very, very limited. And there's, for a lot of women, they may not have ever had a chance to express their inner womanhood or like become in touch with their sensuality or their own like spirit as a woman, and they find a space for that in ballroom. And obviously that doesn't speak to my experience, but I think that is valid
and powerful
because that means that you, although you may not necessarily be who the person or like the picture, your picture may not be the picture of the person that the community was designed for, you have still found a space that works for you. And you have found how the culture serves you. And So
last week I was speaking with Saskia, who does whacking, and she's kind of was talking to me about a lot of these kind of LGBTQ plus like scenes and things that have come from that culture. And I was kind of saying, I was asking her how she feels about maybe like a cis woman kind of participating in these things? Because for me, I see a parallel with like being a white guy in hip hop, and like how do I be a guest respectfully, but still, you know, love and be part of the culture. And I think kind of through talking, what we were kind of discussing was that the thing that has maybe translated to nowadays, even though it was started from a very particular demographic and a very particular community, that it's maybe that hasn't remained the only thing that needs to come towards today. It's just the safe space aspect has been it's like a safe space for kind of, would you say, like anybody that needs it for those kind of reasons, I guess.
I guess so. But personally, I have like my gripes about safe space.
Okay,
I don't think I don't think spaces are safe, and I don't think feel like sometimes, and I understand like the term, and I understand like, how we have to use it, and like but sometimes, that's just a side note, I guess. But I feel like I feel like it's important for those things to remain those ways, but I think it's the duty of people who may say like a guest to understand their position in those spaces, and I think maybe we'll move towards recentering, or do you know what I mean? Decentering themselves and then recentering the person who's supposed to be central for that place. And I feel like that can always be done in a harmonious, beautiful, like nourishing, healthy way. But obviously, I think that's where the interesting thing about the ballroom scene is, because it's not just, it's hella political. It's not just like, obviously hip hop is too, I think, but the oppression that women, cis women, the oppression that trans women, that queer people perceive are still things that we are fighting against today. They're like overarching things which like are still like ever present to, do you know what I mean? It's like right now, right here, right now. Like, so I think, it's like kind of ongoing. Like it's not like, I think that's why it's like, it's something that's stayed like that, and it's important to stay protected like that.
But I think, sorry, just to touch on how we were speaking about, obviously those people that are guests in these scenes, like myself, to make sure that, you know, that the spaces that exist are redistributed safely, or like as much as you can. Obviously, I can't guarantee for the safety of someone else ever. So I understand. I think the idea of like safe space is not always fulfilling what they are supposed to fulfill, because even within the own LGBT communities and events, for example, there has been like discrimination against trans women. There's a problem within that by itself. Like there was even at some balls in some cities where trans women weren't like able to get in because they got the wrong people to be the door. To do the door, you know. So when that happens, it's like you actually have to look at your own community and like sort that out first, and then on top of that, you have to do that in other spaces too. And I think why we're always very how do you say, like offended, which is probably the wrong word, because there's absolutely the right to be offended at that, is that you have so many what you could call whitewashing, I guess, is that you have a lot of appropriation happening, obviously.
This is where I wanted to go. So
when we were talking about classes, for example, like obviously not to shade that at all, because I think they've been doing
if anybody watches or listens to this podcast and you feel personally attacked, come and see any three of us at the next function.
Instagrams will be on the
If you're gonna indirect us on Instagram, keep that same energy when you see me at the next one, because if you don't, I will hurt your feelings. Celine,
there we go. Talking. But yeah, so
I'm an innocent participant.
But just as an example, like obviously these people have been doing a great job in terms of, I think, passing on knowledge, but we have had a history of only white Vogue teachers and Vogue classes taught by white people, and that is, I guess, where it kind of starts, where you have to go and look at yourself and be like, okay, I'm white. If I'm going to be asked to teach classes, what technically, other than sharing the experience of being a white cis woman, what else can I share that actually belongs to this culture that I will probably never be able to fully understand or grasp? Like I will never grasp aspects of that experience myself. So how can I then explain that vocabulary to someone when I haven't actually been through that myself. That's where you need to look at yourself, because you can't take yourself out of context. It's not just like, I think with any dance style, like you can't ask a popper to teach ballet. You can't ask a ballet teacher to I wouldn't personally do that if I didn't have the capability to understand the history of it, how it's linked to its culture, like how it's developed, changed politically.
I guess it's similar to like, you know, saying like a university or something, like should a white professor teach Black history? You know, it's a similar thing. It's like, what's the...
I kind of... See, the thing is...
Or what would be
like,
the way to go about that?
Okay, so realistically, although your analogy is not like incorrect. In terms of ballroom, I don't necessarily have a problem with ballroom spreading.
Yeah.
Although I'm not gonna lie, I'm not watching in certain places where ballroom is spread to. I'm not watching. I'm not watching ballroom spread to the Middle East. I'm not watching ballroom in Japan, and I'm not watching ballroom in Russia. There's when I watched Paris is Burning 10 years ago, when I had to watch that documentary in university class, what I specifically saw, and I watched that film, I saw people like myself in community, like in a likewise community, loving on each other, being a part of each other, like celebrating each other and being happy. Yeah. And that is the only reason why I came into ballroom, so I could be a part of that. Yeah. Thankfully, I have found that, and it's definitely something that enriches me in my day-to-day life. Yeah. What it does for other people is amazing, but what it does for them is for them. So ballroom can spread. I think what the sad thing about when it spreads is that people don't. Okay, when I watch Paris is Burning, in the opening line, Dorian Corey speaks specifically about being Black and queer. Every white person that I've ever spoken to that has watched that film completely went over their head. And for me, maybe because I'm a Black person and I'm a Black queer person, so of course the people that are speaking in the film, I'm seeing them talking and I can relate. Maybe because other people that are not the same identity as me can't relate, and that's okay. Yeah, everyone's different. So I think that like it's spreading and it's doing different things to different people is fine, but you can see where the message and the essence has not passed on and has not lost. Because when it's the truth, like when you see some of these girls and even the girls that are going to classes by esteemed teachers and esteemed competitors, it's like, I don't know what you're picking up in this class, like, or what you're not picking up in this class.
Because that's where we go back to what you said earlier about like you're not going to understand it unless you go to a ball. And like some of these people go to classes because they think it's fab and like it's cool or whatever.
And they can get booked.
And they can get booked and like, you know, go to auditions and be like, yeah, I can do a bit of voguing because, you know, it's like in right now, whatever. Like,
I'm so into voguing right now.
I'm so into voguing right now. But so, you know, that's the point where it kind of just pisses you off because you're like, well, no, this is not how it works. Like you need to go to a ball. So like how sad like that you're not interested enough to actually, you know, do the work and go to the ball. Like what? Because you're intimidated. Because if you're intimidated and you have a problem with with how it is intimidating. Like balls are, you have to have countless like limitless confidence, all of that. You have to have attitude, confidence. You have to love yourself, and you have to be able to criticize yourself enough and love yourself enough to criticize yourself. To be doing a good job for your house, for the people that are in the scene, outside of the scene and inside of the scene. So, you know, we had a specific experience once where at my university there was someone like trying to teach Vogue, and someone messaged me being like, hey Celine, like, do you know anybody, do you know that person? Like they're teaching a Vogue course. I was like, I'm sorry, if I don't know that person, it's probably appropriation because I know everybody in the London Ballroom Scene. So if it's a person I don't know what they're teaching, but it's definitely not voguing. And they just put voguing on their courses. And it's like, we had to actually waltz in there and like as a community and be like, sorry. And then, you know, we're being like, and then you have this whole like stereotyping thing again where it's like, oh, these people are so aggressive, they're so shady, like why I thought voguing is all about sharing. It's like, you don't know anything about voguing. That's not exactly, it's not even with voguing.
It's supposed to be about community, and I thought that it's all about love.
But it's about protection.
You are not a part of the community, so we're not going to show you any love if you're going to put disrespect on our name and steal from us.
That's real. And I think also that's like always the go-to thing with everything. I've had that in so many different situations where it's like any time you try and do or say something, even if it's not culture related, it's like, oh, but hip hop's supposed to be about love, so why are you saying this? It's like, you can still like have conflict and
Of
you can
course.
still address things you're not happy with. It doesn't mean you don't love.
It's not about you looking bad in the beginning when you start off. Like obviously, I looked like all of us were nogging at some point. Like this is what we call like people who can't vogue or like who are just learning to vogue. We call like we only say nogging to people who actually don't do the work. And
like they're not trying,
then just looks shit. But we definitely all nogged at some point because we didn't know how to vogue.
And every beginner has to go through a stage.
And like this is the thing, like when you watch a ball as an outsider who's not in the ballroom scene, you just like, I heard this thing where it was like, oh, but why are they screaming so much? And like what is this, what are they saying? Like why can't they use normal music? I was like, it's not you don't understand that, like you don't even understand what the commentator is saying. You're not listening.
Even when people when I'm watching clips of recent balls and somebody who's just watched Pose is now watching a ball and like they're like getting mad at the commentator talking and they find the commentating distracting. Nobody invited you here. You were not summoned. Don't act like you were sent for. Like, and the funny thing is that like it's really important for us to be honest in the situation. We don't have a problem with ballroom spreading, but like do your history. Like even like when you can see people haven't done their homework. This is a competition culture. Some of the all of the most important things, like the hallmark moments of our culture, have happened in competition, have happened in battle.
Right.
Like the oldest video of a ball that you can find happened in 1980.
Okay.
It's on Vimeo. For those of you listening or watching, if you want to look for it, the actual ball is if you go on Vimeo and search TV transvestite, and you'll find a video of a ball from the 80s.
Sick.
There was also, just because we're talking about sources, there is also, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but because so many people always, when they ask me about ballroom or voguing, obviously the first reference is Paris is Burning because it was the first accessible like proper documentary, but it's also important to say that it was, I think, not well received within the community.
Oh yeah, with Jenny.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
So because it's the first reference, I think people should know before they watch it to also like critically look at it, because I think that the members who were filmed during that movie were actually really unhappy with it because they felt exploited.
Yeah, they didn't like. But in those days, and this is one of the things that like we've even spoken to like legends and icons about in the scene about like knowing business, because ballroom is in business and ballroom has always been in vogue. It's always been the in thing. But when our forefathers have not known about business and not known about contracts and things, and that's how you end up getting effed up.
I think a good reference point is a book that fucking changed my life was, I think it's called House and Ballroom Scene. 1989 to 90, I think.
92, I think.
Yeah, something like some of those dates, but it's basically like a photography collection of the ballroom scene, and it names people and their houses in it. It kind of explains a bit about what the ballroom scene was about, and yeah, I was like blown away. Like in the same vein that you were saying before, like being able to see people like yourself, and I think if it kind of we loop back about talking about the legends and stars and statements and icons, and the reason why there's such infrastructure to it is because, and I feel like I'm like beating a dead dog talking about this, but I think we're not in the canon of history. Like like queer black people aren't necessarily, you can't go to school and learn about queerness, or you can't go to school and learn about black queer history, let alone black history in the first place. Do you know what I'm saying? So to see these things and to give titles and accolades and documentation to these people means that like I can flick through that book, or someone who has never flicked through that book can see themselves in the 80s and see their community and be like, shit, so like this is La Beja and I'm a part of La Beja, or the people were alive and existed and thrived and were happy, and it's like.
And even let's think, the actual biggest history resource in all of ballroom is Kevin Omni's timeline.
Oh, it's true.
But so basically, so Kevin Omni is a pioneer, and he's been in ballroom since the 70s. Like he's like 60 something years old. He actually looks really good for his age. But he has like, it's older people that can't maybe don't know how to use the internet as well. So like it's one web page. There's no subsections or divisions or anything.
You know the ones where it's still in Times New Roman.
No, it's in capitals. It's in capitals.
Oh yeah.
But he has got a timeline of everything that has every major point. So loads of house openings when certain people came into the scene from like the 70s. So like from one of the most obvious captured point of like the general beginning of ballroom is accepted as the documentary The Queen, which has got Crystal LaBeija in it. I'm not sure if Crystal identified as trans by the time the documentary was shot. But by the time she had passed, she was definitely like that way inclined. She was definitely like identified as a trans person. And you can see her in the documentary, like like quite upset that she lost because she knew that racism was at play, and like you see her going off, and that there is where ballroom started diverging. There's still a lot. There's still like the things that we do carry from like the old queer balls. So things like grand marches is something that's still thing. And shout out to Tommy D. Murphy on one of the ballroom historians. I've like learned so much from reading what he's written, and. Was that something else which has slipped my mind? With ballroom and structure, it's, because the culture has widespread, it's even more important. I think that like it can be a smorgasbord of things. If you've never been to a ball, you don't know what about it, and when you hear all these terms. So again, the best way to learn about a ball is to go to a ball. If maybe they don't have balls where you are, watch a ball. Like, and there's various balls documented from start to finish, and like it's a really good learning thing. Like. With ballroom itself, we are Voguers, so we're talking about Vogue, but ballroom itself, the cultural ballroom is split into there are 4 main subsections of art forms. So there's performance, which is voguing, so new way, old way, Vogue femme. There's realness, which is obviously generally the realness categories are generally about passing in society as a cis and or straight person. Okay. There's the beauty categories, which again self-explanatory, things like face and sex siren, perfect tens, and then. So
is that like you can't really be good at them? If like you can't do anything, you just go there, and if you win, you win. You know what I mean? It's like, is there a technique to the what you do?
There's technique to all of them.
So this is just the overarching subsections, like the 4 squares, the 4 corners, and then in each corner it. But
because just for me to understand, so you said it's like I forgot what the subsection you called it.
Face or
like those ones.
Beauty.
Yeah, beauty. There we go. So if it's you call it beauty just as a term. It's not like just who's the most beautiful.
No.
So beauty, within beauty, like Elijah's like grouping them together. So within beauty, there might be a face category. So like face, for example, you would have to be able to sell your face. So you
How
have
does
to have
that?
bone structure, clear skin, good teeth,
but if you
a nice smile.
If you. Like, wouldn't you kind of be able to just tell if you're going to win or not before you
go?
No.
Like,
because it's about presentation.
Yeah, and it's about shade. And it's about shade as well.
How does that work? How do you present a face?
So you know, like when I said about conventions of every category. So face, the elements of face are like, for example, I know that I'm not sure of all of them because I don't walk face and I don't have face. So, but yeah, you need to have clear skin.
Okay.
Nice. You should have straight white teeth, a nice nose, these kind of things. And when you're competing, you're showing these off. Yeah. Like you're going to draw attention to. So one of the things that they'll always do, so they'll catch the light. So you'll always see, especially like for the older people, they'll always do this. And they'll tap, obviously, like their forehead, their nose, and their chin. So like say, oh, this is perfect alignment, or this is like what symmetry is. And so
what if you competed? I'm just asking random questions now, but like, what if you competed, but like you have all those things, but you weren't good at drawing attention to them?
Yeah, see, that's how you might lose, because you have to learn to sell it. You have to know how to sell it. Like that's like part of the whole thing. So
because you could have the
you
most
can have
beautiful
the face.
It's a pageant culture. Everybody that got 10s is pretty. So So it's like, show us your brand of pretty.
And I think that's where like the excitement, the thrill of it comes, and like
right.
It's like where, and also again that safety thing of like when you've got all of those people, how are you gonna choose? How do you pick like who wins? Do you know what I mean? Like that's when the nuance comes in. That's when they have to look for the finest details. And I think in terms of like when we're talking about realness categories, that's really helpful for people. So for people who are trans or trans experienced and are trying to look cis, which in obviously academic terms may be seen as problematic because
let me just
we're not talking about because like obviously people it will come under criticism by academics because the idea of being passable is kind of a problematic idea, and the idea of the binary and there being just male and female, which is obviously not true because I exist. But the reason why it's really helpful is because if a panel of icons is sat in front of you, they're going to see from the back. They're going to know what to look for. They're going to know to look for your lace. Is it blended? They're going to know to look at have you put your makeup in a specific way to make your forehead look smaller, or to make your jawline look
the way
softer.
that you present yourself.
Like, this is things that if you can get your 10s in a ball, then you can walk down the street and no one's going to clock you, and you're going to be safe.
And even about that, so for example, we're talking about the realness category. So again, the whole purpose of realness is specifically to show that you can pass as straight or
assimilate.
cis. And you're not, what you're being judged on is your ability to assimilate and avoid homophobia and transphobia. They're not saying that because if you're a trans person, because I can see that you are trans, that your trans identity is less valid. Exactly. No, it just specifically means this is a pageant culture. This is based, we are judging you based on the image that you are presenting. You are like, not everyone is possible, not everyone is real, and for a lot of people, for some people, that might be their goal because of their own self-image, how they are composing their own identity. Right. But for others, it's not the thing, and so you might not that competing in that category might not interest you, and that's okay. We're just specifically saying this category is about being able to escape all these evils in society, and if you can do that well, good for you. However, for some, not everyone can, and that is valid. And it is valid.
It's like, I guess, taking like an element of the culture which is kind of negative, and like you shouldn't have to have a need to pass in society, but it's like, okay, well, seeing as we've been subjected to have to do this thing, let's make a fucking game out of it, and like who can do it the best, kind of thing.
But that's what it is,
and like have fun with it, and like,
and also and the thing is like, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're more beautiful, because there's a lot of people that are legendary and iconic for realness, and they're very, very average looking. They're kind of chubby, but these things help, because again, if we're talking about assimilation and being able to escape these things, looking like an everyday person is what is going to work in your favor.
And it's also like, in terms of just dance in general, like we do, like, the person that wins a hip-hop battle might not be the best dancer, might not be the most creative person, but they're the best at winning that competition.
And also there's other factors why they may have won. So for us in performance, there's loads of times where you'll see people might come out in teams, or a house might send a couple of walkers. Loads of people have lost battles because maybe stamina, they had to, like, everyone else in the house got taken out, and then they've got a lineup of 6 girls. By the time they get to number 4, no, like, you're human beings, so you might, like, so stamina might have worked against you, or like the judges might be following politics because they might have alliances with other houses, or you may have a personal problem with them. So like, there's various different.
And then there's also the point where you can have as much technique or like vocabulary that is super clean. So for example, if your elements, because we call them elements, like the specific vocabulary that goes with Vogue Femme, for example, you have hands performance, you have the catwalk, the duck walk, the dip, spin and dip, and then floor performance, which are like the 5 key elements of Vogue Femme. So let's say you are a trained dancer, for example, and you're very good at just picking up those movements. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know what you're saying with them. And then also on top of that, even if you're not a dancer and you just have your elements down and they look clean, and like you've shown the judges that you can do that, and they give you your 10s, then it might come down, like it might be then down to your personality. Like you can have a girl that, for example, completely might not be as clean with her elements, but she has so much to say, and like you can read the energy, you can read the story, because it's about storytelling. Like voguing is about storytelling.
No, but that in
that case will win you. Like that will make you win, because you're gonna draw attention. It's essentially about, you know, who can draw most attention, and then if you can get that attention because you have so much to say, you're gonna get that, whether or not like your elements are clean, or like how perfect you can execute like a specific dip.
Like the language of voguing is we always talk about telling a story and storytelling and this and that. And basically storytelling is more because I'm such a ballroom snob that I've actually gone about like trying to figure out how to explain these things to people that are not in the scene. So storytelling is mainly about the flow, and it's mainly about like how you're transitioning in between like your elements and how you're weaving, like you're using your body to express yourself. I
think one thing that's really, because I super agree with you in terms of like using that term with dance, because I talk about that with hip hop and stuff as well, and I think it's the common misunderstanding when we talk about storytelling in dance and in movement is that we're talking about literally like you're telling a story like, oh, I'm this person and I do this, and it's like, I'm brushing my teeth. And actually
no, because the people actually do that. And even for us, like, one of the problems that we've got in performances are people start miming, and it's just they're
exactly.
like...
And I think when we say storytelling, what we're more talking about is that we see a consistent thread in your movement.
Yes.
One thing leads to another. It makes sense. It's not just, here's a random movement that goes together, then this one, then this one. And I think in movement in general, if we just take free movement, there's ways of doing that, and movements linking together and making sense as a consecutive kind of sequence.
Yeah.
But I think also it's like when we get into these styles, the reason of linking things together might be based in history. So it's like that thing was never put with that thing. So why did you just smash them together like that?
And it's interesting because, like, when we're talking about storytelling, like what Celine said is right. You might have the cleanest vogue, like your elements might be precise.
Yeah.
So you're talking, but you were droning on. Your voice was monotone.
This is very true.
Whereas someone who might not be as technical, but like they're voguing with heart and spirit, and you can see that like they came to show you something.
Yeah.
And that is what we prize. And also, and even going back to when you said about like changing the art form, like each of like the legends and icons of performance have a distinctive thing that they've done, or distinctive thing that they still do after 20 years, which people take from today. So for example, like one of the ones that I like to talk to as much about is Janice Zion. So Janice, she's also known, her nickname is Jiggy Jar. Janice, like,
that's a sick nickname.
She's she herself is a trained dancer.
Yeah.
But she is known because she really like brought choreography into Vogue. So like one of her biggest best moments is that she's a really big fan of Michael and Janet Jackson.
Okay.
One of her biggest moments is like doing she did one of the part of this the section from Remember the Time. She goes and then she span and then dipped. And it's like, and then she did it like there's a specific clip of it when she's done it in like 2000 and maybe like 3 or 4, and then she did a production, which is what a production is sort of like really it's like, so your preliminaries, but it's like you'll do it for your tens, and it's a really stylized, like you'll have like stylized choreography. You might have like lip syncing.
Hip-hop, innit?
Yeah, it's like a set.
Right. So that you can work into your rounds, I guess.
Yes, and so for her, this whole production, she spent like using like loads of like things from the Jacksons, but it's because it's her, and because that's her playing to her strengths. That's why it's so amazing.
Right.
It's the same with Yolanda.
Yeah. So rest in peace. So Yolanda, she passed I think last year.
Yeah.
Yolanda, she is an icon, and Yolanda is known for bringing like hip hop moves into voguing, and also she was known for she was like one of the pioneers of dramatics, and she's known for everybody when you see people spin their hair. That Yolanda brought that, like that was something that she really like championed. Like she'll always be doing a tic-tac-toe, a heel and toe, and then like, yeah.
Okay, nice. So how do you guys feel about, on the subject of kind of the culture spreading and stuff like that? Because I was talking about this with someone else who, I've forgotten who it was, but that I feel like for me, in terms of, we were looking at all the different kind of styles under this like street dance umbrella, whether or not Vogue fits under that, but
no, it does.
This this kind of
Vogue is a street dance.
Yeah, the street and club dances. For me, I feel like the ones that are doing the best as their original kind of styles is like breaking and Vogue for me, because in the sense of like in the wider world, you've got you've got breaking in the Olympics now. If it wasn't cancelled, it would have been in the Olympics this year.
That's over.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, it was a big deal from what I gather in the breaking scene, because people were arguing about how and if it should be even in the Olympics, and if that turns
That's
into
a joke, because people call Vogue like the gay Olympics. So that's a key to me. I want to start. Let me do a catwalk at the Olympics.
Listen, let me say something. I'll go and steal the rhythmic gymnastics baton.
Literally,
that's it.
give me that little ribbon, Gora.
The only thing, I'm gonna let you finish, but the only thing that I can see the problem with that is that all the spirit would go from it, because like obviously the Olympics is judged. Certain technique needs to be judged. You're awarded points and certain things. So all of the vim and all of the essence and the spirit would end up disappearing. Yeah,
I think the pushback against that again, if breakers kill me for this, whatever. But I think from what I gather, the pushback on it, because I think that's definitely the first and foremost thing that everyone was like, how can you turn something into like that much of a sport, and like you're going to kill all the the essence and the elements of it. Is that people were kind of saying, well, we're not saying this is the new culture. We're saying we're taking one aspect of hip hop culture, which is breakers going at each other in battles and us judging that, and we're turning that into its own thing in the Olympics.
And that would be specifically just for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And
there's a separate judging system that would only come into play in the Olympics.
For voguing, like for example, although voguing, I personally would now as voguing stands, voguing is a sport. It is a dance sport. Vogue, it never started like that, and that's only happened through evolution of the culture. So, for example, I always credit the icon Jack Mizrahi as like the person who turned ballroom into a sport. So Jack himself is a commentator, and if you watch Pose, you'll see him on the mic. Jack used to be he used to commentate for wrestling, and part of his personality is like he makes you feel like you're watching a sports match in the way that he hosts a ball.
Yep.
But he's also thrown loads of events where series, so like things like Rainbow House Wars and Super Bowl Sunday, and culminating.
That's sick, Super Bowl Sunday.
Culminating in the Rumble
sick.
Ball. So the Rumble Ball has every category in ballroom, but the Rumble Ball is specifically for like just competition, like one after the other.
We're just here to go hard.
Yeah, and that is what turned Vogue into a sport. I think, and it's made it evolve. Like Vogue, like initially was looked on just like an art form of expression, but now, as it's gotten older, and I think sometimes to its detriment, it's the development. I think because people have gotten so caught up in trying to impress people in their Vogue that like they've stopped having fun or they've stopped being original. Right. So for example, like one of the things that we always talk about are breakdown, stunts and tricks, and these are ballroom vocabulary terms to describe musicality.
Right.
So for example, a breakdown is usually just a display of a really, really short fire like piece of choreography.
It's like a sentence,
like
essentially.
Phrase.
So it may be something that you've choreographed before and you found someone to fit in, or it might just be something spontaneous.
Yeah, like sets in breaking and stuff. Yeah.
It might even last all of 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's just a little pre-made little spice that you can throw in.
Yeah. And look, people really, really focus on those now. Like it's always about like entertaining people, and you should be entertaining people, but are you having fun?
Yeah.
But what do you... Oh, actually, wait, no, I don't want to go down that point yet. Let me finish the first one, because I was saying, with Vogue and breaking, the way I see it is like, obviously, like the breaking being in the Olympics is a big deal for breaking and a big recognition of its existence in a way of like, you're part of this thing, and, it's been huge, but now it's a real big organization saying, we recognize this. And I think for Vogue, I've seen a lot of, from the externally, like, a lot of Vogue culture being put on TV and stuff. You've got that show in the States now, right? I haven't seen it, but
or like Legendary.
Yeah, I don't know. I just so what's the one with the girl from The Good Place?
I
think it must have been.
You know who I mean?
Pose.
What's her name?
The one that's the boy's wife.
Have you seen The Good Place, the TV show?
No. The only show that would be. Hold on. No, The Good Place. Jamila Jamil. That was Legendary.
There we go. Yeah,
Legendary.
That was Legendary.
Yeah, that's Legendary.
Of course.
Yeah.
So Legendary was like the first ever live competition.
Right.
But
it was big, huh? Like, and it was on
it was
TV.
huge,
And
it was really big.
but we definitely also had. I think the entire ballroom community, like in the whole world, had so much to say.
Yeah, right.
But
same with breaking in the Olympics.
But we understand that like this is ballroom works specifically for us as the community, but they're showing it to the people, so it needs to be entertaining for the masses. So certain things was going to change. Obviously, hopefully, if Legendary does continue, they will refine the format so somewhere where it can be just as entertaining, but it can be as true to ballroom as possible.
Yeah, I always think it's like, I always kind of make this distinction, or at least ask the question of like, okay, for someone to enjoy your culture, do they have to be for anything really, any hobby, any culture? Do they have to like care all the way about it, or is it allowed to be just a fun watch on TV? Like I always think of like the example of like Fast and the Furious. Like I don't really give a shit about street racing. Like not really. Do you know what I mean? Like
there's not enough room to do that in London anyway.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like so I don't really give a shit about street racing, but I'm glad that someone packaged it into like a super fun thing that I can just watch and be like, that's cool, you jump the car. It's not real, it's not how the culture goes, but it's fun. Like, okay, cool. I know that I make the distinction. I'm like, yes, there are people that live this life and they do this. I'm not saying street racing is the same as ballroom culture, but it's that idea of like, okay, cool. In some ways, as long as people understand that this isn't the real shit, are we allowed to package it and just say, here, enjoy this on a weekend?
I feel like I've had this conversation all the time. Yeah. Because I was talking about like black horror films or like, I don't know, film in general. Like, I think like representation is really important.
Yeah.
And I think like it is like uncomfortable sometimes because you're like, I wish it was like this way, or I wish it was that way. But it's true, like it does serve a purpose, and it is beautiful that, okay, there might be someone that sees that and is like, whoa, what is this? And delves in, finds the actual history and goes, that's an access point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also
you got served is kind of like that. For,
exactly.
Oh my God,
And
you really, and even breakdance, you back in the day.
Yeah,
Literally,
like
but I
breakdance
feel-
wasn't. Yeah, sorry.
I feel like when there's only like one thing, when there's like just legendary, or there's just pose, it's like we put so much, we're gonna pick it apart, like it's bare criticism, we're gonna be like, it should have been this, it should have been that, it should have been that. But no one does that with like a rom-com. Like no one's like, Jennifer Anderson, you've been in too many like shitty films, like
And it's
your shit
shitty
is-
rom-coms.
Do you know what I mean? No one's like, oh,
Same character, every film, every TV show, same girl.
it's like you're playing the same person for your whole career,
And made bare money, made one whole bag of money playing the same girl.
But we just have one thing, and I have to just be like, oh yay, I've got one little thing, and it's like it should be in abundance. It should be like,
so
I think,
guess,
but I do think it runs the line of like, done in the right way, with the right people involved, with the right consultants, with like
as long
the
as
people
it's
from the
yeah,
community.
exactly.
Like,
I think also is worth kind of bringing into this that it's like there's a lot of cultures that it's one thing to kind of, you know, package and dilute street racing, for example. But if you're packaging and diluting something which is so much deeper than just like something that people do, you know, when it's like these kind of where it came from and these kind of marginalized people have created it, maybe there's a bit more care that has to go into packaging it and putting that way, but not necessarily that the idea of doing so is a bad thing, as long as you do it in the right way.
Well, as long as it's facilitated by the right people, like how you said,
and
you
pay
know.
the girls,
Pay them.
book the girls, and pay the girls.
Run us our money, please.
But yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I would one thing as well, because we were talking about prize money and, you know, how the competitiveness, how that's obviously a crucial part of ballroom, but how that's also changing the focus of how you walk, when you walk.
Yeah, because some people only come out now. I think personally, I don't see a problem if you are a seasoned performance girl and you decide that you're only coming out if it's a 1K. I understand that, but I do also think that like ballroom should be
or if you need the money, actually.
because there's no, you might have rent to pay, and you might and the performance that you're bringing that night shows that you might not have a house tomorrow if you don't win, and that's respectable. But it, for me personally, because I'm in ballroom to enjoy myself, although winning the money must be nice for some people.
Listen, it was split by the 5 of us.
Who still won 1K?
I didn't get 1K by myself, girl.
But did you but okay,
it happened.
Did you or did you not win?
I did win.
Okay. It's important.
So Celine's rich,
yeah, it's true. But it's important, like the enjoyment and like you shouldn't like that. We don't want that to what's it called, to overtake. And I remember specifically at one ball, and I think even Jason JJ Revlon was told by another someone that was maybe a bit more senior to him from another scene, don't let money take over the scene, because things will stop being fun and start being
one of the best things, because we were talking about Galaxy in the beginning. The Galaxy Ball this year, unfortunately the only ball that actually like happened this year. But it was fab because I came out with my sister Nala, because we were 007s before that, and we were actually meant to go into different houses, but then we realized that the family aspect is the strongest for us with Revlon, and we both decided, we basically walked you can also walk tag team, by the way, which means you have a partner and you walk a team as a team. And we did that the year before when we were still 007s, and we came back, we wanted to like come back really strong when we were joining a house, and then that happened, we won. But we basically, before we we opened the category, which is usually I was always like not told to do, like usually the fab girls kind of like come at the end of the category, because they like would take their time and they let everybody walk, they observe everybody. But for this one, Vinny, our house father, overall father of House of Revlon in Europe, he was like, okay girls, like this is your first time coming out as a Revlon. we're going to start because this will give you the confidence because you're literally someone to watch out and it will intimidate the other girls.
Yeah.
And so there was this huge a venue called the La Gaîté Lyrique, I think, in Paris. It's huge. It's like, it's got a huge stage. It's got screens everywhere. Like it's big, you know? So we were obviously hyped in our like galaxy outfits because the theme of the galaxy was like everything to do with galaxies and universes. So we were like dressed up like space girls. And it was already like the atmosphere was crazy because I was obviously super nervous. Like it was my first big ball walking Vogue Femme and then coming out as a house. So I obviously wanted to do my house justice because all of the sudden you don't just represent yourself, you represent your house.
Can't let them down on the first try.
Right? You represent your parents.
You want to make a good impression.
Exactly. You want to impress everybody. And also it was a gag like for everybody because everybody kind of like made assumptions about what house I was going to join and Nala as well. And then we come out as Revlon, which luckily it's fab if it's like a surprise to everyone.
Right.
If nobody knows, it's fab because then you feel like, I mean, you probably had all of your ideas and they were all wrong, you know? And we were like in the circle and I remember Vinny just like being super like, okay, girls, like I know that this is like a 1,000 euro grand prize, which was the first time, by the way, in Europe for the women's performance to be awarded a grand prize.
Right.
So on top of everything, that was also like another thing that added pressure, but I literally forgot all about it because all I cared about was just to have fun. And this is what it comes down to. Like, yes, there was 1,000 euros grand prize. Yes, it was my first time walking in that scale, like women's performance, trying to prove myself and trying to, you know, be able to be that woman that moment because it doesn't always work. Like you have to it's about feeling. If you don't have the feeling, you don't have it, and then you just fuck up that day. But what made the difference was that Vinny, our house father, was like, you're gonna have to walk and you're gonna have to just be yourself and just Vogue and don't think about anything else. I want you to leave Celine like right here and you go up and you're a Revlon. And it was the best feeling ever.
One thing that I'll say though is that when the funny thing, and it's actually a really understandable thing, is that when there is prize money involved, the stakes are higher, but also they expect finesse and mastery. So so like even sometimes it'll be funny, like when there might be the prize might be for 1,000, and you'll hear the commentator.
Like 1,000.
You like they'll be like, judges, do you? So like the commentator, when the judges are deliberating whether or not to give 10th, they'll be like, so one thing, so Kevin Jay-Z, Kevin's voice is the sound of Vogue Femme.
Yeah.
And I remember like there's a couple of times where you hear Kevin be like, judges, do you see it for 1,000? So basically,
just reminding you.
No. But that low-key is kind of rude because it just means that you low-key don't really see it. But when it's for money, like for example, like when at the Mugler ball, so the house of Miyake Mugler had a ball last year, and Rihanna, Rihanna's stylist is the father of House of Mugler, Yusuf, and Rihanna sponsored the category for Face. So Face was sponsored $10,000 by Fenty Beauty. So when they're sponsoring for example,
Vogue is light years
No.
Light
Listen. So what's her name? Shannon Balenciaga came out in a life-size birdcage. Michelle Saint Laurent had like she remixed this drag race performance. It was over like, and basically
like a
dancers
dress.
in a dress. It was amazing. But like when it's for so when you're expected to come out for money, they expect you need to look like you have spent money. And you need to look and you need to perform regardless of what category you're working, as if you need that money. For 1,000. If we're watching women's performance or any sort of, so we say female figure referring to all people that appear as women in ballroom, so that so drag queens, femme queens, trans women, cis women, and any If we're saying if it's for 1,000, you need. Don't need, but you're expected to be in a pair of heels. Your hair needs to be done. Your outfit needs to look nice. Like even
no wigs can fall off.
If your wig comes off, that's usually a chop. Unless you're like a legend, or like the wig was meant to come off and then they've got another one.
Using it for something, or I don't know.
Like there's conventions. Like even I remember watching when we watched the Heather's Ball, and like at that time I think Becky lost to Chloe. Becky's like, it's the same fuck every time she come out. And like someone got chopped and they were like, that's not $1,000 look. because it was female figure performance for $1,000, and they were like, it's not
So
$1,000.
we had the same at the Galaxy Ball, where Vinny was actually on stage, because he was obviously like also partly hosting the ball, but he wasn't a part of the judge. Like he wasn't on the panel. He was just helping facilitate the ball. He was on stage and he had a little horn that he held it by himself. And so obviously we started off the category. We all got our tents, obviously, because we looked €1,000 expensive. That is how we looked. So like we made sure that our looks were representing that, you know, like, yeah, I put effort into my look, like, you know, and even if you don't have money, you can make something look expensive. Like that is part of your craftsmanship that is expected of you, to figure out ways to, even if you're broke, if you really want to walk that ball, just make sure you either save up money or you find ways to make it look expensive. Yeah. And then there was, it was so hilarious. Like you can actually find it if you just type in like the Galaxy Ball women's performance.
Do you know who it was that Vinny blew the horn at?
No, he blew it at everybody. He blew it at everybody who didn't look €1,000. So whenever there was a girl who literally was just, so the theme was obviously Space Girl.
Yeah.
You had to have a mandatory, like usually some categories always have a mandatory element. For example, in that it was like you have to have a mandatory touch of silver. Doesn't mean that, you know, again, it's up to interpretation, right? And like some judges might still not like your look, even if it's right.
Yeah.
But if you literally like take €1,000 as a reason for you to turn up in nothing but a plain simple dress from, I don't know, like Primark, they are going to chop you.
Yeah.
And because obviously like that's not enough. Vinny was up there on stage and he literally, for every girl that came, he just had a honk and he was just like,
oh my God, I love
it. And then the judges, it was almost like a pre-chop and it was hilarious.
Like often, so when you do get chopped, so sometimes when you are awarded 10, so again, preliminary round 10s, they're sometimes, so they might just put up their hand and they'll be like this, that's 10s, or they'll go like this, that's the chop, or like X.
Yeah.
Some people, sometimes they'll have like an air horn and they'll spray the air horn.
Stress.
Or the promoter will give you props. The promoter might be like, okay, everyone's got fans, or everyone's got like glow sticks or something, and they're like, chop.
What we were saying before about the kind of the prize money changing the way people walk and stuff. I guess also my thing on that is like we have similar discussions kind of in a lot of the like hip hop styles or pop in or whatever, where it's like, okay, people aren't like, they don't care about the scene, let's say. They're more just like, I want to battle. And the way that the battle scene has become such a big thing has changed the dance. Like it's made it more, you know, like a lot of the kind of sets and these sort of things have come into it. I don't necessarily have too much of a problem with it. I think what is maybe interesting is that it's the barriers that we set to entry. So when we say, well, this is an open entry, anyone that wants to come up and sign up their name can do so, then it's hard for us to then look at the categories in whichever thing and be like, oh, these people aren't caring about the culture, because we've said that there's no barrier to entry besides
I get
paying.
what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
So although prize money definitely has changed certain aspects of ballroom, not everybody has prize money has prize money balls, and not everybody has money to offer prize money. So often the prize money balls are usually at very, very specific functions that are like, so that would be a ball that would qualify you, and if you won that, if you're campaigning to get Vogue Femme of the Year, if you won that prize money, that's
puts you up for the running.
You're on, like you might be that will can affect your eligibility.
Right.
So,
and I don't know if you have in Vogue, like sometimes we have like invite only battles, so like there's no prelims.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's like you can't be let's say if what we're caring about is the because often in hip hop is more like who's the most popping or the top level kind of people, but it can also be who's about, like who do we see, who do we want as part of the culture to be in this competition.
We've got that. So they've got a ball that they hold in Philadelphia called The List.
Okay.
So for the category, they'll be like, okay, so the named people on the list can walk. If your name is not on the list, if your name's not on the list but you want to compete, it's 100.
So this way it like ensures that the people who are invested in the culture get to be a part of it, and it's not just anyone that...
No, but it's more specifically about making sure the competition is hot.
Right. So that's more about level than culture.
So it's like if you feel like you're up to the standard and you're also going to entertain us this evening, pay the 100 and come and walk. But because ballroom voguing has always been a battle dance and it started as a battle dance, that's not that would never be an issue for us. We live for the although we live for the drama, like voguing has always been a battle dance. So we need to see, like, you'll see people with really the vogue is clean. The art, the way they express themselves is amazing. But you're not battling. You should. I don't think of ballroom as different to capoeira or, for example, like even jousting and fencing.
It's like intrinsically against someone.
Yes, like it's like even like you'll see, like, so in terms of capoeira, you'll see, like, and even they used to do it in the 90s. Like they'll kick at someone, and for the more flexible people, the leg might go over the head.
Yeah.
And that's a cute thing, especially if your leg is completely extended and then you land it and you don't stumble. It's a really nice thing to look at, and also that works in your favor because you have breached their personal space.
Yeah, right. So
you
it's all
are
about
not
that.
allowed to touch, by the way.
In Old Way, you're allowed to. You're allowed to lock.
Yeah.
And when I say lock, like, I mean, like, I've seen a couple people had their nose bars, but you're allowed to lock, so you can have someone in a headlock.
Wow.
You obviously, you can't just like grip them up.
It has to look like a pose, essentially.
Pose over the top of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everything
And you
always
can
at
pin.
all times kind of has to look aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Well, I get that should be the way it happens
Yeah.
in hip hop as well, but everything is kind of supposed to look good. But
Sometimes people do touch, and sometimes they get away with it. So, for example, sometimes when the trans women are battling, okay, I'm a cis man, so it's different. I can only comment on what I've seen, but sometimes they might, obviously, where Vogue Femme is a dance that is based in femininity and comes from trans women, they might point out someone's features, like, as I say, they're undesirable,
right?
And that's an accepted thing in the culture. Whether or not it can be said that it's positive or negative is not
It's just
for me
part
to
of the
say.
culture.
But also because that's specifically happening between two people who the culture comes from, it just that's the way it is.
Right. So that would be received differently if it was like a cis man or a cis woman doing that to a trans person.
No, it's not.
Definitely.
That'd be
That's
hella
not cute.
different.
Yeah, and even
right.
like you'll see that sometimes. Personally, I feel a type of way like when I'm seeing battles. So like for some for female figure categories. So like that's like a catch-all term for, again, the women in the scene. When a cis woman is battling a drag queen or a femme queen, I don't like it when I'm seeing you there like patting you in between your legs or your tits, because what it seems is very much saying I'm a real woman and you're not. It's different if that's done to you first, or like you're in your battle, in conversation, you're talking about femininity,
right.
But just to do that, it's crass for me, and I personally would chop for that.
That's part of the thing of understanding the context
Exactly.
of what you're
and
doing.
knowing your place.
It always understands, exactly, in what context you do it.
Because I guess, like, running throughout all the styles is shade. So you're having that battle, you're having that conversation with the other person, saying that I'm softer than, or I'm more feminine
But
than,
it's
or
where the
I'm
line
extra.
is. and not
Yeah.
crossing
It's
that.
about how you do it. I remember battling someone, and quite early on, and being like, when I was younger, like, people do like that kind of mime that we were talking about, like say someone smells, like mime a smelly thing, and it's like, I remember being told, like, that's a little girl shade, that's like for a baby, that's like what you do when you're little, your shade should be a grown woman shade, it's can be more refined than that,
it's very like
more
nuanced
subtle
and contextual these
And
days.
also you learn how to cope with shade within the battles. I had a battle once where I was like, yo, I don't know how to deal with this, because
When you got kicked. No. So this was in Paris, and Celine was battling a drag queen, and at the end, the person stuck out their leg and then actually like pushed Celine with her foot.
Because we had such different Vogue styles, and I think she had seen me at the Galaxy Ball, or she didn't, and she just thought she could just like. Which is fair, that's her language.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to deal with it in that moment. And if I would have had the strength and the confidence in that moment to be like, you know what, like, you can kick me all you want, but you're never gonna have my vocabulary, like, nah. And I couldn't do it in that moment. I was so pissed off because I felt obviously like, because for me, I go to voguing, or like I vogue and I want to be in that space because that's the space where I don't get touched when I don't want to be touched. I don't do voguing necessarily outside of that context. Like if we're asked to vogue, for example, for jobs, or like I usually decline, because I'm like, I don't know. Like, you can't always Vogue.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, it's just
It's
not
a very
thing.
contextual movement.
Even in clubs, like even when I'm in clubs that are like for house or something, like we were saying this, we were actually at a house jam the other day, which, you know, we really enjoyed, and we did feel comfortable enough to Vogue at the end of the day. But it is always like a situation where you have to assess whether it's the right space for you right now to be yourself and to be your feminine, sexy self, because it will always be subjected to someone else's gaze, and you don't necessarily always want that, and that is what you're kind of like safe from. Yes, it's probably confusing to understand, I think, especially for men, because I've had conversations with them where they were like, yeah, but what's the difference? And like, you're obviously being judged for your sexuality, and I'm like, no, that's like, yes, I'm being judged, but it's my choice and I want to be, because
This is a competition.
It is a competition, but it's not for you to judge, it's for people to judge who understand the different layers of femininity because they have experienced them themselves or they feel close to it, you know. For someone who doesn't really appreciate their own femininity in themselves, which a lot of men sadly still don't do, it's hard to have that conversation with them because they're like obviously confused, and I understand that confusion comes from how they've been raised. So I do try and have patience for that, but it's hard. It's hard. Like, but that's for
you
example.
may have the time, but I do not.
Exactly.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
How? Oh, I don't know how to phrase this.
Just ask.
So, do you feel that there is a place or isn't a place for, like, let's say, a cis straight man in Vogue, in ballroom culture?
Okay, so actually, to be honest, straight men have been coming to balls for decades.
Yeah.
Like often, like back in the day, for the straight men that did come to balls were often dating the trans women in the scene.
Right.
Or like they may have been other connected in some other ways. Like Eddie Murphy used to go to balls.
Right.
Like loads of like Frankie Knuckles used to go to balls as well. It's not generally. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I don't come to balls to watch straight men.
Right.
That's not what I'm here for. But the general consensus at that moment, and with what I've heard from speaking to various people, if a straight man is walking a ball,
or even just you mean so that's one side of it, I think, is the competition side, but even just in the culture and just going to watch and stuff like that.
I mean,
how do you see that?
To be honest, realistically, okay, and I have to talk contextually about this.
Yeah.
I remember when balls in London began, and there is, of all of the nearly the 30 plus balls that's happened in London, I've only not attended like 4 or 5.
Okay.
I remember when balls first started here, and me and Omar used to feel a really type of way about like being on display, because obviously this is a specific culture that comes from a specific people.
Yeah.
All of the people that are watching us don't look like us.
Yeah.
But then, like, when you realize the dynamics of it, like for example, where we live in England, which we are a minority that makes up 3% of the population, and when we are throwing balls then, and for example, they're asking you you have to have bar spend to meet, and you've got money on the door to meet.
Yeah, right.
Whoever's spectating is like important, because those are again are going to help you make those.
They're
things.
like facilitating you being able to have that space.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Because they're there.
The straight men have come to balls. Like I think I remember, was it Maverick Sabre one time came to one of the earliest balls. It's not, so come is not a problem. I don't really think it's a problem to come, because again, you're coming to watch the competition. How you conduct yourself in the space, what you do with the information that you've learned and what you've seen after that is probably what the deciding factor of how beneficial or how detrimental you can be as a spectator.
And I think it's definitely like we're talking about being a spectator. I don't really see someone like being a part of the culture. I think this is very rare, but we always make a joke. It's like when you go to someone's house. Like you take your shoes off at the front door. Like there's a certain level of respect of how you carry yourself, and if that's not how you're willing to conduct yourself, the door.
This is what
you can go.
Yeah, and I feel like, because I was saying before, I went to I think at least one, maybe a second one, but I can't remember.
You went to a ball in Juju's?
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't know.
There's been a couple in Juju's. So
it was ages ago. I don't even remember.
Yeah, Juju's was like our venue for a while, no?
Yeah.
I just went to one, and I find a similar feeling going to like crump sessions and crump battles where me personally, I don't feel uncomfortable at all, and I don't feel unwelcome or anything like that. But sometimes I've been, and it's the same kind of parallel for me with crump sessions and Vogue balls, or the one that I went to, where I see other people kind of who aren't part of the scene, like feeling like they need to join in. And for me, I was like, oh, I don't feel like I want to join in because I feel like that's disrespectful. Like I'm not in joining as in like walk, but I mean like all there's little mannerisms and there's little ways that you like celebrate someone that is very different.
But to be honest, that would probably be informed by your experience as a dancer and as part of you've taken part in competition cultures. So you understand that there is no need for you to join in because you didn't go there to compete in the first place.
Yeah, I just had a beer and sat and watched.
That's usually it's happened loads of times. Like where even I remember there was a ball at the Barbican which I partially hosted, and for one of the categories this drag queen like came and invaded the floor and like where people were competing and I had to drag her up the stairs because it's just like go sit down. Like you had a drink and it's fine, but we understand like even and it happens everywhere. People always like drunken spectators want to come and involve themselves and they think it's a bit fun. For us, we're just like please fuck off. But
leave the stage.
But it happens like.
But I feel like the most important part to mention as well is with if you're a straight man, for example, you go to watch a Vogue ball. Obviously, like if you do it respectfully and all of that stuff, then it's I guess it's fine.
This is what I was thinking as well. Is like I said, I remember going to this ball. Grabbed a beer, sat down and watched. It was cool. Like, but then when I left, also it was like I felt great. I didn't feel unwelcome. I didn't feel like anyone was like, "Why aren't you standing up and screaming?"
Definitely.
Like,
but that's
and then
because,
when I left, I was like, "Oh, maybe I should I have? Was I being like a dead weight by being there and bringing the vibe? You know what I mean? It's like, is there a way I should have participated?
I feel like what I wanted to touch on is as well if you're. It depends on how you're watching as well. Because like, are you watching because you want to express your opinion on women and trans women and femininity and queer people? Or are you going because you genuinely have an interest in the culture and you enjoy seeing it? Because so many people, feel like they're asked for their opinion. Like I've had so many discussions and conversations with women about like womanhood and I'm like, why do you feel the need to talk to me about this when it's nothing that you can relate to? Like if you're asking me questions genuinely out of curiosity without any judgment and without having to necessarily express your opinion or like force it upon me, that's different. Like because there's lots of obviously we always have to fight this thing where it's like the common thing the common narrative would be like, oh, women do it to to attract someone else, and it's like, no, I actually do it for myself. Like, and that's like the common thread. It's kind of like gotten less and less and less, but I think that like you need to always ask yourself, what is your intention? Like, what is your intention when you go to a ball? Like, what do you actually want to get out of it?
Yeah, I think that's like a question like that we should all ask ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
Like,
why am
something
I here?
like why, and it's not even like why am I here? This is why kind of like before I was like, oh, I can't really speak on an experience that isn't my own, in a sense that like you have to ask yourself as a cis man or like as a cis woman or whatever it is, or whoever you are, like, okay, me in this space, like what is that? And I think it's a really healthy thing to do. It's a really healthy thing to do. Like just for all of us, for me, even like for me as like a queer person of color, like to be like, okay, like what am I giving off? What's the dynamic of me in this room today now? Exactly. What's the dynamic of me going to the supermarket? Like that's not a negative thing to have this self-reflection. And I think it's really, I think the good thing about the ballroom scene, it forces you to do that. It forces you to look at yourself and look inwardly and see, okay, like this is where I am at my life, or this is what I want, and also lean into the change and lean into the shift or the transformation and the transitional parts of you that are like, actually me being like, actually I'm okay with, I don't know, expressing myself in a more feminine way. Let me lean into that. Like, let me lean into that. It's a healthy thing to do.
One thing that I want to mention, and I think what you're specifically getting at, honestly, it's important. Honestly, it's people happen, and I can imagine, like, obviously, as a straight man, coming to a ball might be a fun thing, but also it's like, you have to remember that, like, in society a lot, people get really, really riled up when people talk about spaces being designed for specific people and to serve specific needs. And because this is a patriarchal society and where we learn as men that everything is ours, or like we are important, when you are told no, or when you're told tread cautiously, they're like, oh, but why are you infringing on me and X, Y, and Z?
The quote? There's like when you come from the like side of the oppressor or whatever,
if you side
equality feels like oppression in that way.
And it's and I think that because people don't understand like why we may have an aversion to straight men being in the space is that like we came here to escape homophobia, to escape misogyny, to escape transphobia, you being here is replicating, is bringing that into the space, and these things exist.
Or even the like even if you don't have that, it's like people might not know that you don't have that because they look at you and they're like, oh, you don't know, he hasn't said anything, like
right, exactly. And we don't like, and until we know more information, for us, you could easily be here treating us like this is a zoo.
Yeah. And you know what, this is kind of why I questioned it after I went, because you know, you were saying it's like whether you go there for like to judge or whether you go there to enjoy. I kind of went for neither. Like, I was just like, I think I was out and then my girlfriend was going. She does whacking, so I think there was a whacking category. I don't know.
Okay. So you came to a very specific balls.
There we go.
You came to, no, you must have.
Is that the circus ball? Circus
That's
ball,
the one.
yeah.
That's the video.
Oh my god!
There was a whacking category and Jenny
You
entered.
saw me before we knew each other then.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
What's your girlfriend's name?
Jenny.
Jenny.
She's from Canada. Jenny Lou. I don't even remember her like whacking crew.
No, that's fine now, because the thing is that the specific balls that would have been Jason's ball.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
for
sure.
Yeah, I
sure.
think does he host?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Was he in roller skates that day? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
I wanted that ball.
Yes. No,
But
it's
so
fine.
I think the thing for me was like I went and it was just like I was out and then I think my girlfriend was competing, so I was like, oh yeah, I'll come through. Came, had a beer, enjoyed it, left. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be a part of Vogue culture and I want to know everything. And I
Yeah.
wasn't like, I hate this. I was just like, I'm just here for a night. But then when I left, I was kind of like, oh, but of course that's how I'm going to feel, is I have the luxury to traverse different spaces without having to think about it.
Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have gone. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe I shouldn't have, been in there without.
No, but the thing is, there was a reason for you to be there. Your partner was competing.
Yeah.
That's not an issue.
Right, yeah.
And also I think, from my perspective, and maybe it's similar to Jason who threw the ball, like, London is a small scene.
Right.
It's like a baby scene that's like growing and it's getting in its stride, but it's like Jason was a part of that whacking culture. And me personally, my experiences of like my entry point to ballroom was the club, like was the gay club, and was going to places like Madame Jojo's where we're in spaces with hip hop dancers, house dancers, whackers, and seeing people. And I remember like picking up movement quality and being like, oh, I like this, but there's something to it. It's not the same. And I'd seen people who are now like a part of the scene, someone like Diva Miyake Mugler, who's like a woman from the London Ballroom Scene, and seeing her Vogue.
Oh, I might know her, I think.
And I remember her giving me little
Trocadero
adjustments.
days.
Yeah.
Exactly. These are the same spaces which we were all in and kind of in amongst. And I think as the scene in London kind of grew and the ballroom scene like has taken its own way, there's like overlap and crossover where like it took me a while to understand what voguing was and to understand that until I like researched it and I went to like uni and like read that book and saw Paris is Burning and I was like, hold on, I've been voguing this whole time. I was like, hold on.
Right.
For me, when I was thinking, I used to think like that moment. Have you ever had that moment when you're in the club and like you're with like your people or whatever, and the walk, maybe it's a queer thing, but the walk that you do from the door to the cloakroom, and you can bust through that club and every single bitch in that room is turning to look at you.
Yes.
And I was like, once I started
I don't
finding
think
out
I've ever looked
ballroom,
that good.
I was like, bitch, I was voguing. That was me pumping. I was pumping runway, and they knew. And so, do you know what I mean? And it's like only till now that I'm like,
No, but that's legit. Like I definitely identify with that, where once you get into the culture of it, you realize elements of the culture that you've already been around. Like
exactly.
when I was first learning about hip hop and like when I first started doing hip hop in the UK, like no one fucking knew, like hip hop freestyle, no one knew what it was. Everyone was just guessing and like trying to, like YouTube had just come around and no one knew what the fuck was going on.
And the thing is, even just sorry to cut you across here. YouTube, ballroom has been on YouTube for as long as YouTube has been.
Right.
I'm finding like clips of flipping Leomi and Alora like that got posted 13 years ago, and I'm like,
but maybe
was I using YouTube 13 years ago? In 2007, YouTube was there, but everyone was on Daily Motion. Everyone was on Daily Motion. Like it wasn't that. Like,
and you didn't know, maybe it wasn't all connected that it was that part of
we
the
didn't know
culture.
what to look for.
Yeah. And I think so I had that when I first started kind of learning about like, oh, hip hop is like the vocabulary we use came from like social dances and stuff like that, and these type of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been doing that with friends. Like, you know, when you're out at parties and there's these steps, and I'm like, oh, like, you know, now we're like with the light feet stuff, and we're learning about like chicken noodle soup and stuff, which that stuff is part of like light feet culture, and now it's kind of being adopted into like hip hop culture. But I'm like, I remember that from the time that it happened, and like my friends were doing it and I was learning it, and it was just like a fun thing from the video. But now you start to connect the dots and you're like, oh, that was an element of hip hop culture that I participated in.
I'm sure you remember snap dancing, you know, when what's it called?
Snap
Then
your
T-Pain came out.
do the step. And then long like white tees and the Air Force Ones, like
went jerking, like
jerking.
I think as well, this is why like part of me is okay with things like Legendary, because it like marks those time points. You know what I mean? Like I remember for me, for Ballroom, like for having like Laomi and Deshawn on America's Next Best Dance Crew and seeing Vogue, that I think was a first reference point for a lot of people. That was like
same.
what the, like I never seen this before, like, and then delving into that. And I think even for Vinny Revlon, I think he talks openly about like that being his experience of seeing Lay in that.
Because I remember him saying that like when he watched it, like before, because Kendall was his cousin, like, I think Kendall was working before him, and when he first saw Vogue, he's like, then after a while he got over himself and he's like, no, this is kind of fab.
But I guess it's that we talk a lot about like representation and stuff, and I guess it's also beyond the like person, like identity, like representation with identity. There's also representation in terms of cultures and stuff like that, and it's like there's a difference between, or I guess it's the battle between keeping something pure and keeping it only for us and keeping it there, but also it's important for these things to be represented to the general culture, because we might not know that voguing exists, and it's like, but or you know, we might not.
People just end up making assumptions, and and then it just gets
and you don't know
appropriated.
until it is put onto a wider scale. What we kind of want, really, I would assume, is to move to a place in society where not everyone has to be involved in everything, but like the random person in their thing can be like, oh yeah, I know about voguing and how, like, I'm not,
and not being related to Madonna.
Exactly.
So the more we put
and
that
actually,
on a big stage,
Madonna wasn't even the first person that had voguing in her video. That was Queen Latifah coming to my house, and actually, you know, Amari Ricci. His parents are the African dancers in that video.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. See, you learn something new every day. Yeah.
Mad.
But this is the thing. I wanted to say something as well where I just forgot about it. Damn.
Did they
Oh,
not
yeah.
also?
For example, because we were talking about exactly, so like those events, even Street Star. I mean, Street Star is like,
I was going to ask you about this.
exactly.
And Funkin'
so
Styles.
we Funkin' Styles.
I
Like
was at
when
Funkin' Styles
voguing
when they
was
did
like
that.
introduced like as a category to that as well, where
Early
you know,
on even, like
early on,
2008.
and we have the best clips of Laomi, for example, or Lysindra from those events, and like even, you know, because sometimes it's hard to like obviously cross over. Like I said, it's hard for something like voguing and ballroom to be mixed up with
and just stick
other,
it as one category.
Yeah, because it's the only queer space of dance culture that is, you know, that remains queer.
Because
remains queer.
Wacking's like spread out a bit, but voguing specifically, like when I've watched Georgina, and like I've spoken to Amber as well, and like what Amber was saying is that like how voguing generally came to Europe was through the dance competitions, and like loads of dancers from Europe generally happened. Loads of like female dancers from Europe had been in New York, and they'd gone to other styles, and then they'd come across voguing, and then they started doing it. So when it first came into when voguing was first at Funkin' Styles and first at like Street Star.
Do you know when it first came to Funkin'?
I think 2008.
I think I was there.
Yeah, and
no, that would have been 2010 or 11.
No,
yeah.
So I know
I was there pretty early on, I think, when they first introduced it.
But yeah, around about that time, between 2007 and 2010, that's when it first came, and they were mixing styles, they were doing various different things, and obviously by the last time that voguing was at Street Star, like they had Vaughan Law, they had Deshawn on the mic, so like it looked as close to what it would look like at a ball, I think, and it was being judged as if it had been at a ball, and that's what we needed, because voguing is a part of street dance culture, and it should be represented next. And even when we go to events for house dancers, they're very much happy to see voguers there. Like they're like, you guys, Vogue is a house dance.
Yeah.
Like,
I see Vogue and house dance the most like interconnected.
Definitely. We even had a Vogue house night that JJ did like years ago, and was fab. But also like the other thing about that is though that as much as that can obviously have positive side effects, like the negative side effects that I, for example, only started to realize was when I was talking to someone about that clip that I definitely was one of the first clips I think that completely like blew me away, which was a battle between Lysindra and Javier. With the water bottle.
That's what I was there for. I thought I was there.
So for
And you know,
example, oh my god,
That clip pissed me off.
I literally,
I
but
hate that
I was watching that clip back
let's
then.
talk about that, because that was an
and
experience for me as
exactly.
well.
So I was like, oh my god, this is so beautiful. Like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. And then a few years later, I talked to someone about it. I was like, yeah, but also the problem is that they were subjected to so much like homophobia and
You can
transphobia.
tell by the
like,
room,
you
like,
can
in
tell
that
because they're
clip.
like,
I'm
what
like-
the fuck are they doing?
When
Like,
Lysandra got on the table and the judge got up, that was transphobia.
Yeah.
Sorry, and even Lysandra said that, like,
Yep.
when it wasn't, they didn't
Yeah.
realize that that she's not like a cis woman before, because Lysandra is drags. Big ups to legendary Lysandra Ninja, like
Yeah.
the architects of ballroom in Europe.
Yeah.
But she said that when they realized that she wasn't a cis, like she wasn't an actual woman,
In air
like is
quotes.
when people started moving funny.
Yeah, I think that like you could definitely feel that in the air being there. I think it was interesting because I don't know what, like, yes, there was definitely that aspect of it, like, you know, even I think I remember what you're talking about, the judge moving and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
like when but this is after
because they
threw
get
the
on
water.
they get on the
table, and it was like with Red Bull, they were opening and spraying
and
it. Yeah.
spraying, and then I think even like Javier pins Lysandra to the
Yes, that was a
table.
mess.
it was messy. For
You know
sure.
why it was an experience for me was that, and this is why I was like, this is interesting with Vogue being in the same spaces as these other styles, is because the way everything runs is very systematic, and there's the same rules for everything, and that broke all the rules that we thought we were expecting. And I'm not talking about in a kind of straight or anything that type of way.
You've never
just
seen
in a
the culture
competition
run like
way.
that.
It's
Yeah.
like
Never seen it,
every
yeah.
battle I've ever watched, and I was quite like new, 3-4 years into the scene at this point. Every rule that we know, like you don't touch, you don't get up on the judges' table. I've seen a crumper maybe do it once, but you don't like mess up the floor, because some, you know, if a popper poured water on the floor, we'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
No, listen.
I've got to dance there.
All of us have had to compete on wet floors before,
Yeah.
or when someone spilled a drink. People get up on the table a lot.
But again, I think it's just a lack of awareness then,
Right,
you know,
and-
because it's obviously like whoever facilitated that had a lack of awareness of what the context is within which the ballroom community competes, you know,
and
because
how
then
it
all
was
of a sudden
could go. It could go into this direction. It could go into this, and like maybe there's a way to do that doesn't just throw the dancers and the participants in the deep end, because like you
Yeah.
said, now they're subjected to stuff that they're just doing their culture.
They
And
didn't come in for that.
in a way, like the people who are watching are just kind of in their culture watching, and it's like now you've smashed these two things together with not really a lot of consideration.
Yeah.
There's friction that's bound to happen where it's like I think there's a way that it needs to be done. I find the same with Crump, because I see Crump as like a similar thing where it's, you know, we've got like pop-in, break-in, hip-hop, house, which has very much like found its harmony, and okay, we're gonna run all these styles the same way, they just look different. But I feel like Vogue and Crump have very different cultures to the rest of it. Even competitively, I'm talking about. Obviously all the styles have different cultures.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think it does need a bit of care when being put into these other spaces, because of anyone, it wasn't the organizer taking that homophobia, it was the dancers.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
exactly.
And also, I feel like it's a battle culture, and we all understand what battle culture is. When there's pressure, when there's adrenaline, when there's like the feeling, like when you're in that moment, like you're so in tune to yourself, but also like those outside factors really have an effect on what happens in a battle. And like in a cypher, like you see people try to cultivate these safe spaces in a cypher, an encouraging environment. And I think, no shade to the room, but I don't think the room was cultivating a positive vibe. And I think having two people then with this overarching feeling maybe of shame or judgment in a negative way, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, transmisogyny, what happens then when you're now the two people in the middle of that competing? What's the stakes? What are we competing for? What are we competing about? Am I competing for the approval of this room? Do you know what I mean? I think that's where it went left.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that was it.
And I just brought it up because the ignorance we've all, I think, come to terms with this year, at least if we haven't before. But it definitely is something that I think a lot of people hopefully reassess themselves about their own levels of ignorance, because it is something that might not always, like, it has so many layers basically because of how we've been raised and like how much lack of education there is on everything regarding racism, transphobia, homophobia, and everything regarding that. So the fact for me that when I watched the clip, I didn't see any of that. I didn't see any of the hostility. I didn't see that because for me, I just saw these two people and I was like, it's fab.
Yeah.
But that's because I have such a different, I wouldn't pick that up.
And you know
and
what?
then now when I rewatched it, I was like, oh my.
No, but the
like,
thing is, even when when I've seen like instances of Voguers going on like televised dance shows, I think so you think you can dance one time, someone from, it was a Canadian one, and someone vogued on it, and the judges were, you could smell the homophobia through the screen. They're like, oh, it's too effeminate, and I'm just still like, you've just watched someone express themselves in a feminine way. That's the how dumb.
Yeah.
How dumb. Like,
yeah, it's femininity still
I
has
think-
this like negative connotation for some, not as much
Well, yeah.
anymore.
But for
it's-
men-
but for men, usually, they use feminine in a sense that is like weaker.
I think
or-
it's scary too, because
Scary,
it's like,
yeah.
bitch, I'm powerful, baby. I'm motherfucking powerful,
thing that I'll
girl.
say,
Like, and it's gonna shake you. We're gonna be scared because do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I am empowered, and that makes you quake in your boot.
One thing that I'll say, and I'm not even going to go too deep into this, is that also I think the person, I can't remember their name, but the person that had voted on that specific episode was a black man. And as a black man, when you, as someone who is a black man, when you express femininity and you are confident in that, people take offense to it because we're generally looked at in popular culture as like the bastion of masculinity. So people really take offense, or people really take it personally when you're not that.
It's seen as a contradiction.
Yeah, no, but like people, like even people outside, like other black people, like take
Right.
like see it as like betrayal, or like like they see it as like it's often it's to the point where it's looked on like it's treason.
Because that respectability politics, as if like I'm letting you down in some way,
Yeah.
or like I have to be the representative for everybody, and if I'm do you know what I mean, I'm being judged.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I think what's also important, I think, for me to say or to make clear is like, I don't think ignorance is negative inherently. I
No.
think we're
No.
all, like, me coming to this podcast, like, I hadn't met you two. I had just met Celine, obviously we know each other, and I don't know anything about the ballroom scene. I was ignorant in this conversation, but that's not a negative thing. It's how you
No.
express the
But the
ignorance,
thing is
or
that
what you
you-
do with that.
Exactly.
Sorry to I need to just think, but you've invited us here to talk about the culture that we belong to. That's not ignorance. That is again beckoning into a greater understanding. The way ignorance is not always a bad thing. It's how you try and expand past that is what will determine
Exactly.
whether or not you're being positive.
Whether
or
you
not.
even defend that ignorance, or
Yeah,
whether you,
exactly.
like, for me, I'm like I can't remember who said it, but it was like, I think it was you at the beginning, like, I'm gonna correct you, and I was like, yeah, cool, like that's what I'm here for. I'm gonna just say some shit.
It's
Yeah.
the
You
defense
tell me,
mechanism,
and yeah, straight away it was like, oh, it's not Vogue's Ballroom, and it's like,
Yeah.
if you then, it's how you react at that point, and if you're like, you see, like, it's if I'm here today to defend my ignorance and to stand, or if I'm just like, okay, cool, I'm here to learn, and I think that's what I think people tend to, let's say the wider public don't tend
because
to
we
lean
don't talk
into.
anymore. Everything happens on Instagram, innit? I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And I think people don't tend to not like lean into that of like, yeah, I am ignorant, so let me ask, like,
Yeah.
as opposed to like,
But also-
I should, and it's maybe a feeling of I should already know this, and I feel shame for not already knowing.
One thing
Yeah.
I'll say with ignorance, and I think that often the ignorant don't know how to fully express their concerns or their lack of understanding in a way that is respectful,
Yeah.
or a way that actually like tries to express the brunt of how they're feeling. So for example, like I remember like this is a tangent, but I remember speaking to my cousin, and one time he asked me if like when he's like, basically the gist of what he was saying is this, that when young gay men come out, and after they come out their behavior gets more feminine, is that assimilation into gay culture? And the way he asked me, I got mad. After we spoke about it, then I understand what he was asking, and I specifically explained to him that it's not about assimilating into gay culture. It's about having to assimilate under culture that is straight and heterosexual. So,
but it was more not the sentiment behind the question, but it was the
how it
phrasing
was
of the
asked,
question.
yeah.
That was the problem.
And also why why you're asking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, actually. I think it's being able to articulate what your sentiment is. And it's like you have to be, even when, especially like, you know, talking about ballroom or Vogue is one thing, and then it's like talking about kind of different cultures and stuff. It's like you have to, the more marginalized the people, the more sensitively you have to ask, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But and also I feel like I don't think any of us speaking from like, we are mighty then thou, we all knew, because I feel like we all still had to come to an understanding to get to the place that we were. For me to even understand my own identity, for me to understand myself as like someone who identifies as non-binary, is on a journey in their transition and those things, I had to like listen and, like we were saying earlier, like lean into that transition, lean into the uncomfortable, unknown, changing kind of parts of yourself, and be like, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to like take that barrier down and see what it is, ask those questions, be tentative and be like, I don't know, like I don't know what these are. I feel like even for me personally, non-binary, I was like, what's that? I remember specifically the person that I live with, Dove, they're another person in the ballroom scene, and they were non-binary, or they are non-binary, and I remember like having a conversation with them and having to be like, what is non-binary? I don't
you know what's
I remember how against the concept of our non-binary
like,
identity that you used to be like 3 years ago. she wasn't here for it at all.
And also the culture that I grew up in, like I was going to like bashment raves when I was younger, like dancehall like clubs, underground, which is a similar culture to the ballroom scene. But I remember vividly like going to a club, if someone says, oh, my name is Marcia, I took her as Marcia. Like it was just a woman. I accepted that, but there wasn't like an in between. There wasn't like, I didn't understand like the diversity of things, and it took me having to like learn and understand and ask questions to find those things out, and also like read and also like look into my own cultures. Okay, there's the Hijras in India. There's this identity that's already existed. Like outside of Eurocentric ideas,
Topsy-turvy and carnival,
lots of different places in the Philippines, loads of different cultures, two spirits, like but yeah, I think it's not something that is just like, the learning isn't just for cis straight white people, it's for everybody. It's like, and I think at the time that was like it was inaccessible for me, like I didn't grow up like working class, I didn't know these things, these terms. But it's only through those questioning, those careful, tentative answers that you find things. Even Miss Thing over here, like it used to call me tomboy, and I was like, it just sat so well with me, because I was like, I've never been a boy. I've never been a boy, but I'm boyish. I had like that kind of energy to me. I was like, some days tracksuit, but at my core, there was a woman in there. Right. But yeah, I definitely think it's for everybody. Now that's the brand.
But I think like I had a conversation recently where someone that I'm close with was saying that they are so intrigued by this type of culture and like trans people and non-binary people, just super intrigued, but they feel like every time they would, or they feel even too scared to try to breach it. No, what's the word? I don't know. Try to open the conversation with people, because they see so much people being shouted down and like seen as like, oh, you're doing this, or you're questioning me for the wrong reason. So they're like, I don't know how to not make someone uncomfortable by asking, and I feel like that's a real shame that they don't feel.
But do they know any? Do they actually know any trans people?
Yeah,
I don't think so, and this is part of it.
No, but that's why
it's hard to. It's also hard, and this is coming from my experience as well, where it's hard to want to know about a culture, but not to just go and find someone from that culture with the express purpose of like, I want to question you about yourself, you know?
Exactly.
And then it's like, while you're waiting to meet a friend who's part of that culture, you're kind of like, well, I'm ignorant, I don't want to be, but I can't go find them just to ask questions. So what do I do?
I think like, I think like it shouldn't be the onus necessarily on the community. Like if you are interested, like the same way if you're interested in golf, Miss Thing, you will go to the library, you will get the index,
True.
you will look up golf.
And like, you're going to go and watch old videos of Tiger Woods.
Literally. and I think like this in the same vein, and the same way I had to read to know about myself, like in my what's this in my book, in my bag, decolonizing transgender 101. Do you know what I mean? Like make the effort. It doesn't necessarily have to be down to that community. There's literature, there's artists,
and there's so much literature. There's so many like literary scholars that have abundance of knowledge. Like I know we in this age of information, especially of people understanding about different identities, everyone's much like Google is free. Google is free.
And could you imagine
Google
also,
is free, and also like all you need to do, like once you start reading one thing, other things will become apparent. But the questions that you want to ask, think about why you're asking them, what intent, the intent behind the question, how you're phrasing it, and then and once you work these things out, you will be able to go forward. And also work on any preconceived notions that you have about the people that you are asking about. Because when you are approaching without knowing, without knowledge, with ignorance, but even if the ignorance is benevolent or thing, like you need to make sure like why do I want to know this? Like, am I trying to extend my own understanding of different identities of people? Am I trying to become more accepting? Am I trying to undo my social conditioning? If you're trying to undo the social conditioning, watch a couple videos on YouTube and read a couple articles first.
And also, like, obviously, you can also start by following on Instagram, for example. There's so many people like who speak about their experiences.
Mad activists, mad scholars, stay posting that Instagram feed. Like you know where you're having to unfollow them because all they post is knowledge, and I don't always wanna digest shit on Instagram. Like there are so many like
if
esteemed,
Instagram is for you, that is obviously
because I
can
also think about I always think about like I never had internet when I was like in school in my house. But I remember I imagine there's lots of people who did, and imagine the people that Googled am I gay, am I trans, like there was an intention to learn, and that's like the same thing that you can just do. Like, you have the same intention.
Sick. I think we're gonna have to start wrapping it up.
That's fine.
Not that I don't want to continue talking, but I have to keep some sort of
course.
timeliness. Otherwise, people will be like, 4 hours? I'm not watching 4 hours.
But you will.
But you will. I actually forgot it was filmed. I was like, whoa.
Well,
I know me too.
So actually, this camera only goes up to about 2 hours. So we probably died about 20 minutes ago. I would say.
That's fine.
But no, it's all good. Look, guys, honestly, I super appreciate everyone coming.
No, thank you for having us.
Yeah, really
Thank you
nice.
so much.
I think it's the first podcast that there's been guests that I haven't even met before today. Yeah, I had one other guy, Jordan, who we had like said hi at events, but we hadn't hung. So that was a nice chat. But it's really good, like, honestly, to meet you and for this to be like the first introduction that we have to each other is super nice for me, because it's like it's an appropriate time to be like, let's get into it from day. Not like me like stopping you on the street or something like that, or it's like really like, okay, let's talk about everything.
It's the place for discussion and conversation.
And I honestly really appreciate you guys coming down, as I do with every guest that comes, even if they are my friend. It's still appreciated, just to say that.
Of course.
But yeah, no, thank you for listening, everybody. Episode 26. We're finding out today about, I think, a lockdown, whether it's happening or not. So whether or not we get to episode 27 and 28 before Christmas, let's see. Fingers crossed.
Business meetings.
Yeah,
Business meetings.
Do it by Zoom.
I just
like
have
everything.
to start. Yeah, I'm not.
No, it's peak.
No,
I don't want to do the
everyone,
same.
everyone and their mum has been on Zoom doing podcasts.
I'm so glad that you said that.
It's
by
not
force.
face to face.
Thank you.
It's not the same.
Yeah, for me, it's like I want to sit down with people and have real conversation, because as much as it's about just talking and having something online, I want to sit down face to face with people. I think it brings a different dynamic.
Oh, absolutely.
You have different conversations than you would over Zoom, and I think that's part of what makes it special. Is like, for me, what's special about today, not to get too sentimental right now, but what's special is that you three chose to give up your time to come down and talk with me, and that's really nice, and to like talk about what you do, and that's amazing. Not that it's less amazing, but kinda. But like, it's easy for you to do it from your living room.
Yeah.
The fact that you came all the way down here for me, like, is really nice for me, and it makes me feel good. So,
and do you know
super
something?
appreciate that.
If I can just say, one of the things that I've actually really enjoyed about today is that we've actually had like a really, really big overarching discussion about everything, without getting too into the technical things or things that like small little I feel like we've had like a quite
Yeah.
nuanced
Covered a lot of
conversation.
bases.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
very
happy you
happy
feel
with
like
it.
that. I'm happy if you guys enjoyed it. Thanks everyone for listening. You can like and subscribe and all that stuff. And it helps me to grow if you do that. So please do that. And obviously all that shit, like put it on your Insta story and stuff. If you've listened, if you've got to the end, just like let the world know. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, see you next week, everybody. And thanks for listening.